Romantic Tales. Chapter 208. Shut up. The most important thing now is to defend the city, not to fight for personal feelings. We can't let the Nanzhao army step into the broken snow pass. This is the purpose of guarding the border. Wait for the reinforcements. The young general looked at him in disbelief and asked, "Can the reinforcements make it in time?" They only had 80,000 soldiers, while the Nanzhao army surrounding them and the Prince of Li's army from Lingzhou outflanked them from behind had at least 300,000 soldiers. Murongxin was silent for a moment and said firmly, "There's still time as long as we can defend the broken snow pass. So don't fight for personal feelings." The young general glanced unwillingly at the clamoring Nanzhao soldiers and gritted his teeth. "Yes, General. General." The messenger came in a hurry. "General, it's reported that Lord Wu Qingliang, the general of Yongzhou, led 20,000 soldiers to reinforce. They were ambushed just after crossing the Yunlong River and Lord Wu died." Everyone present couldn't help but gasp. Murongxin only felt that the world was spinning in front of him. He quickly stabilized himself and said, "How can it be? How can Prince Li be so fast?" Report. General, the governor of Yongzhou surrendered to Prince Li last night. Early this morning, Prince Li's army broke into Qingyuan City. The vanguard will probably arrive outside Yonglin City this evening. All the generals were shocked. There weren't many soldiers defending Yongzhou. As the highest official in Yongzhou, the governor of Yongzhou surrendered to Prince Li. No wonder Prince Li's army could be so powerful all the way. They thought they could delay for 10 days, but they were afraid that the broken snow pass would be surrounded in less than 2 days. Thinking of this, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Murongxin was so angry that he laughed. "Good. What a good governor of Yongzhou. Who is willing to defend Yonglin City?" Several young generals came out at the same time. "General, we are willing to go." Murongxin looked at the young men in front of him who looked serious and nodded. "Good. Yunting Xiaoshu, I will give you 20,000 soldiers to defend Yonglin. Understand?" "Yes, General." The two young men replied in unison. After receiving the military order, they turned around and left. No one asked how they were going to defend Yonglin and how long they would have to defend it for. Looking at the backs of the two young men, Murongxin glanced at the generals present and said, "We'll do the same. Understand?" "Yes, General." Yonglin City, which was usually quiet, was now in a solemn state. The shops on both sides of the street were closed, and not a single person could be seen on the street. Compared to the stifling and oppressive atmosphere of shattering snow pass, Eternal Forest City was already filled with the glint of blades and shadows of swords. Below the city walls, the soldiers who had set up ladders tried their best to climb up the city walls, but they were forced back down by the people on the city walls with stones and arrows. When the people in front fell, there would naturally be people at the back who would take their places. The soldiers on the city gate tower were also shot down from time to time by the divine archers below, falling to the ground until they were beyond recognition. At this moment, no one cared about these things anymore. Everyone could only crazily kill each other. Everyone had forgotten that they were all from Dechu State and were once comrades. In a pair only you die and I live. How about it? I'll go up first? On the city walls, two young generals looked solemn. "I'll go first." Pulling out his sword, the young general turned around and left. The person who was left behind, watching them leave, humphed helplessly. He turned around and pulled out his sword to cut down a person who was trying to climb up the city gate tower while the soldiers on the city walls were shot down. The city gates were opened and the young general led a group of people and rushed out. They rushed into the enemy's formation and rampaged, reducing the pressure on the city walls once again. The young general took the lead and killed countless people along the way. Soon a burly middle-aged man blocked his way. The middle-aged man held a broadsword and swept away the people around him. He mocked, "Is there no one else under Murongxin's command? You actually sent a brat who is still wet behind the ears to block my way. If you know what's good for you, immediately open Yonglin City for me and I'll spare your life." The young general sneered, "I don't accept nameless people under my command. Where did this renegade come from? Tell me your name and I'll leave your corpse intact." "I'm Sun Wei, the vanguard of the Western Army personally appointed by Prince Li." The young general rolled his eyes. "So it's Imo Jingli, that traitor Sun Wei. I've never heard of you. Die obediently." The long sword in his hand was fast and ruthless. He mercilessly slashed at the man who claimed to be the vanguard of the Western Army. For a moment, the man was flustered and finally died in the hands of the brat he looked down upon. The young general spat disdainfully, "You're just a pussy. How dare you show off in front of me?" The vanguard was killed and the besieging army was suddenly in chaos. The general who was left behind to guard the city took the opportunity to command the army to attack. Not long after, the besieging army retreated in panic. "Yashu, how was it?" Back on the city wall, looking at the defeated enemy, the young general who had just shown his skills and vented the depression of these days, was beaming with joy. The young man called Xiaoshu looked into the distance and frowned. They should be the vanguard of the enemy. Although they were killed when the Real elites come, the young general couldn't help but frown. The joy of the victory just now gradually dissipated. Not to mention hundreds of thousands of soldiers, even hundreds of thousands of pigs could trample them to death. It was already very difficult for 20,000 people to defend the city, not to mention to go out of the city to meet the enemy. Yonglin City was not like Broken Snow Pass. If they defended and didn't go out, Prince Li's army might bypass Yonglin City first. Although it was a little troublesome, it was not impossible. Once Broken Snow Pass was taken, their isolated city with only 20,000 people would be in the bag. Who cares? If they come, I'll beat them back all the same. I Yunting am not a coward. The young general snorted. Xiaoshu also gradually revealed a smile. "You're right. Let's make it clear first, it's my turn next." Perhaps because the vanguard troops in front of them were defeated and returned, the troops behind them came later than they expected. They didn't hear the sound of war drums until the next morning. Xiaoshu and Yunting stood on the city gate tower and looked down. Yunting couldn't help but gasp. Emojingly brought out all the troops in Lingzhou, right? The front of Yonglin City wasn't spacious, but at a glance, the fluttering banners and the densely packed figures made people not want to estimate the number of troops. Xiaoshu said in a low voice, "When we were in the capital, I heard that Prince Li was an idiot. Now it seems that it's not entirely true." Looking at Prince Li's troops below the city, they were strict and orderly. They didn't look like an army that an idiot could bring out. Yunting curled his lips and said, "Either he has an expert under him or he's pretending to be crazy. Can an idiot start a rebellion? He's crazy." A few people came out from the enemy's troops. One of them, a middle-aged man who was obviously not a general, shouted upstairs, "The guards upstairs, listen up. Immediately open the city gate and let us in." Yunting curled his lips. "Who are you? Do you think we'll let you in just because you said so?" The middle-aged man said, "I'm the governor of Yongzhou. Yongzhou has already submitted to Prince Li. Why don't you immediately open the city gate and let Prince Li in?" Hearing this, Yunting couldn't help but curse in a low voice. "I was wondering who it was. So it's just a traitor. There's a path to heaven but you don't want to take it. As a traitor you should find a place to hide. How dare you come out and show off?" He took out the bow and arrow from the back of the soldier next to him and shot at the governor of Yongzhou without hesitation. Chapter 209. The Yongzhou governor, who was speaking proudly on horseback, was pulled back by someone beside him. The arrow flew past his ear. He was so frightened that he screamed and almost fell off his horse. Yunting clicked his tongue with some regret. "Your luck is too bad." The Yongzhou governor's persuasion was useless. One of them waved his hand and had someone send him back to the army. Only then did he raise his head and say to the two people on the city gate tower, "Are the two generals Yunting and Xiaoshu on the city gate tower? The two of you only have 20 to 30,000 soldiers at most. You can't stop my 200,000 soldiers. Why put up a stubborn resistance? Actually, we are all citizens of the Dechu state. If there are any losses, everyone will feel bad, right?" Yunting spat and sneered, "What a joke. Do you still know that you are a citizen of the Dechu state? I thought it was some traitor's dog barking here." The expression of the people below the city changed slightly. They quickly continued to laugh. "The emperor is tyrannical. King Li is the true son of heaven. We should naturally follow King Li's orders." Spit. Yunting raised his hand and shot another arrow. Seeing that the other party easily dodged it, he didn't care. He shouted angrily, "I have seen many shameless people, but I have never seen someone as shameless as you. The emperor is tyrannical. Did the emperor kill your parents or steal your wife? The true son of heaven. Do you think I have never heard of it when I was far away at the border? Seducing your future sister-in-law before marriage and getting caught with another woman on the day of the marriage. Also, fainting on the day of the wedding. If your body is so weak, stay at home and rest. Don't come out and embarrass yourself. Xia Shu, who was standing on the side, heard Yun Ting's angry scolding and looked embarrassed. The soldiers on the city gate couldn't help but laugh loudly. Even King Li's soldiers below the city gate had strange expressions. The general who wanted to persuade the other party to surrender wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. He pointed at Yun Ting hatefully and said, "Good brat. Don't fall into my hands. Otherwise I will make you wish you were dead." Yun Ting raised his chin and said arrogantly, "Just you wait." Behind the heavy army, Mo Jingli's face was pitch black. His gloomy and cold aura made the generals around him not dare to make a sound. Although they were far away from the front, Yun Ting's words were transmitted using internal energy. The generals by Mo Jingli's side all knew some martial arts, so they naturally heard everything clearly. Mo Jingli's expression turned ugly. "Attack the city. I want that brat alive." "Yes." The person beside him waved his hand and the sound of a war drum shook the sky. The army on the drum had begun to attack the city. Mo Jingli clearly wanted to end the battle quickly, taking down most of the areas south of the Cloud Mist River before the Imperial Court's reinforcements arrived. Therefore, even if it was a small city like Yonglin, he did not show any mercy. After all, Shattered Snow Pass was behind Yonglin. This time Yun Ting and Xia Shu clearly felt the pressure that was several times greater than yesterday. Just defending the city wall was already too much for them, not to mention diverting troops out of the city to fight. Even if they could divert some troops, once they were surrounded by tens of thousands of troops, they would not be able to return. The huge round wooden stakes under the city wall began to hit the city gate. Even the entire city wall seemed to be trembling with the heavy thuds. The soldiers on the city wall fell down one by one, but the enemies who wanted to climb up the city gate tower seemed to be endless. Yun Ting and Xia Shu also kept waving their weapons to fill in the gaps caused by the deaths of the soldiers. The air was filled with the thick smell of blood. Seeing that the defenders on the city wall were getting fewer and fewer, Yun Ting's white battle robe was full of blood. How unlucky. This is the first time I personally lead an army into battle. Is it going to be completely wiped out? Don't worry. If you die, the Imperial Court will definitely confer you the title of general. Xia Shu twitched his lips and said with a faint smile, "Thank you for your comfort. I still want these bastards to die first." Yun Ting said. He raised his sword and stabbed an enemy who climbed up the city gate tower and wanted to attack Xia Shu from the side. Then he picked up the corpse and directly threw it down to the people who wanted to climb up the ladder. "Brothers, hold on for me. If we let these traitors pass Shattered Snow Pass, we will be finished. Shattered Snow Pass has been built for hundreds of years and those southern border barbarians have never stepped in. We can't let it be destroyed in our hands." Yun Ting raised his arms and shouted. The soldiers guarding the city roared in unison, "Defend Yonglin to the death." They were all soldiers, but those who were stationed in the country found it difficult to understand the mentality of the soldiers who were stationed at the border. Guarding the country was the most important glory and mission in their hearts. It was also the responsibility that was engraved in their bones. In the mountain forest a few miles away from Yonglin City, Yili stood under the shade of a tree on a hillside and looked into the distance. The sound of soldiers and horses could be heard clearly even from a few miles away. Gongzi, Yonglin City can't hold on anymore. And San quickly walked over and reported. Yili lowered her head and said, "It's not bad to be able to hold on for so long with only 20,000 men. Who is guarding Yonglin City now?" An heir said, "It's General Murong's 2 lieutenants, Yun Ting and Xia Shu." Yili frowned, "Only 2 lieutenants?" An heir nodded, "There are not many generals guarding Shattered Snow Pass. These 2 are General Murong's most promising subordinates. They are also the 2 young generals that General Murong values the most. That Yun Ting even killed Prince Li's vanguard yesterday." Yili frowned, "Mo Jingli is also in the army?" An heir nodded and pointed to a place in the distance where a banner was fluttering. "Prince Li should be there." Gongzi. Yili shook her head. Mo Jingli must be heavily guarded. Besides, he himself is not a mediocre person. It's almost impossible to catch the leader first. An heir and San. "Yes. Pick a few people and kill Yongzhou's governor." An heir and An San looked at each other and said in a clear voice, "This subordinate obeys." Yili said in a deep voice, as long as we kill Yongzhou's governor, don't do anything else and retreat immediately. Yes. Then Gongzi. Yili sighed softly and looked at the blue sky. I'll go with the Black Cloud Cavalry. The Black Cloud Cavalry commanders standing behind her looked at Yili with respect. Even though they should listen to Wang Fei's orders, but a Wang Fei who was nimble and smart was easier for these proud and powerful soldiers to accept than a master who only had looks and talent. Even though they hadn't known each other for long, but these days Wang Fei had followed them on horseback and traveled 100 li a day. She was even more agile than normal soldiers. This caused the Black Cloud Cavalry to truly submit to this mistress. An heir and Ensan also knew that even though they were called Shadow Guard, Wang Fei did not need people to follow and protect her at all times. Wang Fei had sent them to carry out various missions for their future. She hoped that they would be able to stand openly in the crowd and not just be bodyguards who could not see the light of day. This subordinate obeys. An heir said. At the same time he exchanged a look with the Black Cloud Cavalry commanders. Wang Fei's safety is in your hands. Chapter 210. The leader of the Black Cloud Cavalry raised his eyebrows and agreed. Is everything ready? When an heir and Ensan left, Yili turned around and asked. Gongzi, everything is ready. We can set off at any time. Yili nodded, very good. Divide into 4 groups and enter the battlefield from the 2 wings. After a quarter of an hour, the rest of the people get ready to move. Yes. The situation on the battlefield was getting more and more difficult. In the beginning, only 1 or 2 enemies climbed up the city wall and were immediately killed. Later on, the enemies who climbed up the city wall could still kill a few people. Although they didn't cause too much harm for now, they wouldn't be able to last much longer. Enchanting finally didn't have time to waste his energy shouting and cursing. He waved his weapon silently, his young face revealing obvious tiredness and cold, murderous intent. Xiaoshu's right arm was torn and he had to switch to using his left hand. Luckily, his left hand swordsmanship was as sharp as his right hand. After a wave of attacks stopped, another wave of attacks came. Xiaoshu raised his hand and swung his sword to sweep an enemy off the city wall. Suddenly, another person appeared on the city wall, an assassin with a ferocious expression. Enchanting exclaimed, throwing off an enemy and pouncing over. Xiaoshu was only stunned for a moment, but he saw that person's ferocious face had an astonished expression as he fell backwards. 4 black shadows were like 4 sharp black arrows, shooting into the tens of thousands of troops at a shocking speed. Wherever it went, it was like a black tornado that swept through everything before it. Furthermore, it quickly split the army of tens of thousands of soldiers into pieces. Soon the gray battlefield was torn apart by the black. What is that? Looking at the men in black flying under the city wall, they drew their bows and shot 3 arrows at the same time, as if they didn't even need to aim, accurately hitting 3 people who tried to climb up the city wall. Then a few faster black tornadoes rolled by, and the ladder under the city wall turned into a pile of scrap in a very short time. Then the riders on the horses left as if there was no one around. Enchanting looked at the scene under the city wall in shock and exclaimed. Xiaoshu covered his painful wound and forced a smile. It's the reinforcements. Quick, shoot the arrows. Because the ladder was destroyed, the pressure on the city wall was greatly reduced. Xiaoshu hurriedly ordered the soldiers on the city wall to shoot arrows to support the riders in black below. They stood on the city wall and naturally saw it clearly. There weren't many reinforcements, but their momentum and fighting power as well as the momentum of the thousands of cavalry made the enemy a bit confused. There were few cavalry in the south. Cavalry. Xiaoshu looked at the black knights below. Even if these knights could fight against 100, it was not a long-term solution for them to be trapped in an army of tens of thousands. Xiaoshu shook his head. No need. If we guard the city gate, they can kill their way out. The Black Cloud Cavalry was invincible on the battlefield. Mo Jingli was watching the battle with his subordinates at the back of the enemy army. He didn't take this small Yonglin city seriously. This journey was too smooth. As long as he took down Yonglin, he could almost control half of the Dechu state. In fact, even Mo Jingli didn't expect it to be so smooth. He glanced sideways at the Yongzhou governor standing at the side. Coldness flashed in his eyes. Those who betrayed their master could also betray their second master. This person was still useful now, but in the future. Swoosh swoosh. Several hidden weapons pierced through the air, shooting towards Emo Jingli, who was in the crowd. Emo Jingli alertly dodged to the side, and the guards by his side immediately surrounded him. There's an assassin. Protect the prince. A few figures appeared from all directions. However, they didn't pounce towards Emo Jingli, who was protected by layers of guards. One of the guards turned around and pounced towards the Yongzhou governor, who was hiding at the side. The Yongzhou governor was so scared that he wanted to scream. However, he couldn't hear his own voice at all. He only felt a chill in his chest. A dagger pierced through his heart. He raised his head in fear and looked into a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. A low voice sounded in his ears. By the orders of the imperial concubine, rebel, kill, retreat. He casually pulled out the dagger in the Yongzhou governor's chest. Blood immediately spurted out. An heir turned around and slashed the neck of the guard who pounced at him. He said to the few people who were still fighting. They quickly broke away from the entanglement and scattered. Furthermore, they quickly blended into the ranks of King Li's soldiers and gradually disappeared. Emo Jingli looked gloomily at the Yongzhou governor, who was already dead on the ground. The generals beside him also had a serious expression. They also had a hidden fear and worry. They didn't hear the assassin's words completely. However, the last sentence, rebel, kill. Indeed, they heard it loud and clear. The Yongzhou governor was killed so cleanly in the midst of tens of thousands of soldiers under heavy protection. How could they not tremble in fear? Emo Jingli didn't have time to get angry. Soon someone cried out, "What is that?" Everyone looked over. Black-clothed riders had appeared on the battlefield at some unknown time. The soldiers at the front were already showing signs of defeat after a few charges. Where did so many riders come from? These riders were extremely fast. They occasionally crossed each other. From afar it was impossible to see how many people there were. They only felt that the entire battlefield was filled with black-clothed riders. Everywhere they went there were corpses. However, the terrain outside Yonglin City was narrow. It was impossible to spread out all the soldiers and horses. For a moment they couldn't do anything to them. Black Cloud Riders. Emo Jingli gritted his teeth. Black Cloud Riders. Everyone trembled again. The timid ones couldn't help but turn pale. Black Cloud Riders, the Ding Palace's most elite force. It could even be said that they were the Dechu State's most elite army. They were personally controlled by the Ding Prince. Apart from the Ding Prince and the Ding Palace's mistress, who was acknowledged by the prince, no one else could command this army. The Black Cloud Riders appeared here. Then, Prince Ding was definitely nearby. Impossible. Emo Jingli said coldly. That sickly Emo Shuyao definitely couldn't have gotten here so quickly. He had secretly left the capital. Even if Emo Shuyao received the news and immediately chased after him with his sickly body, it would take at least a few days for him to get here. Even if he felt it, he still didn't have the strength to command the battle. Then, who is commanding this Black Cloud Riders right now? A general asked with a trembling voice. Emo Jingli snorted. He was sure that Emo Shuyao definitely wasn't in Yonglin. However, who was commanding this Black Cloud Riders? Feng Jiao? That wasn't right. Feng Jiao couldn't command the Black Cloud Riders. Prince, there are a large number of riders coming from the south. Emo Jingli was stunned. How many? Many, countless. The scouts were all killed when they got close. Everyone looked towards the south. Sure enough, they saw smoke and dust billowing from the other side of the forest. There were also galloping horse hooves that seemed to shake the ground. Without a few thousand horses, there definitely wouldn't be such an effect. Chapter 211. Prince. The signal to retreat sounded and the enemy troops retreated like a tide. At the same time, the Yonglin city gates opened, and the black-clothed cavalry quickly rushed into the city, and the heavy city gates closed again. On the city walls, looking at the departing enemy troops, Yun Ting and Xia Shu looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. If these people did not feel it, they probably would not have been able to hold on. Yun Ting casually wiped away the blood on his sword, and returned the sword to its sheath and asked curiously, Xia Shu, who is it that came to help us? Xia Shu sighed and said, when you go back, don't brag that you grew up in the capital. You can't even see this and spend all your time on collecting those rumors, right? He even knew that Prince Li was fooling around with his sister-in-law, but he still acted like he was muddle-headed. Yun Ting tilted his head and blinked. then suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked at Xia Shu in a daze. After a while he stuttered, Xia Shu, it can't be the one I think it is, right? Xia Shu rolled his eyes at him. Other than that, who else can it be? Yun Ting finally screamed and quickly ran down the city gate tower. Xia Shu helplessly shook his head and also followed. The legendary Black Cloud Cavalry, he was also very curious about it, okay? On both sides of the wide street below the city walls, there was a dense mass of people and horses. But no matter if it was the people or the horses, they did not make a single sound. The entire street was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. As soon as Yun Ting walked down the gate tower, he felt a sharp killing intent and an oppressive aura coming at him from all directions. His originally overjoyed expression involuntarily disappeared as he stood up straight and looked at the person in front of him. The person at the front was also dressed in black, but he did not ride on a horse like the others. Instead, he stood there quietly while leading a black steed. Yun Ting could see that he was different compared to the cavalry on horseback. He was petite and kind, and did not have the stern and fierce aura of the cavalry. He even looked at Yun Ting with a faint smile in his eyes. However, Yun Ting knew that this did not mean that this person was weaker than others. On the contrary, this person should be the leader of these people. I am Captain Yun Ting of Shattering Snow Pass. Thank you for coming to my aid. I wonder, how should I address you? Yili looked indifferently at the young general who was clearly nervous and expectant. She couldn't help but find it funny. But his face was calm. Commandant Yun, is it convenient for us to talk somewhere else? Yun Ting was still in a daze. Xia Shu, who followed behind him, said, Of course, this way please. I am Xia Shu, the captain of Shattered Snow Pass. Yili nodded and turned to the Black Cloud Cavalry behind her. Rest here? Yes. The 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry got off their horses in unison. Their actions were so uniform that it was shocking. Yun Ting came back to his senses and said, Everyone must be tired from the journey. Why don't we rest in the camp? Yili said somewhat helplessly, I'm afraid there won't be any time to rest. Presumably, Yonglin City also had a lot of injured soldiers that needed to be taken care of. But these war horses still need to be taken care of by the two of you. Xia Shu naturally understood. Fortunately, although there weren't many cavalries in Shattering Snow Pass, the fodder for 2,000 war horses could still be provided for some days. He nodded and said, Don't worry, young master. I'll send someone to take care of it immediately. Young master, this way please. Yili nodded and followed Xia Shu to the military camp not far from the gate tower. Yun Ting was a little dizzy. He looked back at the black-clothed cavalries who either sat down or closed their eyes to rest or wiped their swords after sending the war horses away. Then he looked back at Yili, who followed Xia Shu with a few black-clothed men. He shook his head and hurriedly chased after them. In the hall that looked a little shabby because of the temporary setup, Xia Shu stared at the black-clothed young man who sat in front of him leisurely and looked around the hall. He also saw the 4 black-clothed cavalries who stood beside him as his guards. Young master, can you say anything now? I haven't asked the origin of young master and the rest of you. Yili looked at the two of them and smiled. No wonder General Murong would send the two of you to guard Yonglin City. Commandant Yun is brave and valiant and Commandant Xia is cautious. It's really a rare combination. Xia Shu smiled bitterly. If young master and the rest of you hadn't arrived today, I'm afraid that Xia Shu and Yun Ting could only apologize with death. He still stared at Yili. He wouldn't forget that the young man in front of him hadn't told him his identity. Yili was helpless. She raised her hand and pulled down the bun on her head, letting the black hair slide down her shoulder. She smiled faintly and said, I'm Ding's consort. Ding's consort? Yun Ting and Xia Shu looked at each other. Although the situation in front of them was unexpected, it seemed to be reasonable. Except for Prince Ding, only Ding's consort could mobilize so many Black Cloud cavalries. But how could Ding's consort, who was rumored to have disappeared, suddenly appear in Broken Snow Pass and even lead the Black Cloud cavalries to rescue Yonglin City? And it was said that Ding's consort was the daughter of the minister of the imperial court, the granddaughter of Mr. Qin Yun. She was a delicate lady from a noble family. How could she? Yun Ting felt even more dizzy. He stood aside and didn't say anything. He let Xia Shu, who was obviously calmer than him, handle everything. Xia Shu was also frightened. Took him a long time to come to his senses. He said, Why are you here? Yili smiled and said, I wasn't here at first. I heard the news that Broken Snow Pass was besieged. Fortunately, I made it in time. If you two don't believe my identity, is Miss Murong, the daughter of General Murong, still in Broken Snow Pass? Xiaoshu's face changed slightly. He said awkwardly, it's not that I don't believe your identity. After all, the Black Cloud cavalries are the best evidence. Just. Yili nodded. I understand what Commandant Xia means. Don't be nervous. Both of you please sit. Xiaoshu and Yunting looked at each other. They thanked each other and took their seats. Originally, they were happy that the Black Cloud cavalries came to their rescue. But now that they found out that the one leading the Black Cloud cavalries was Ding's consort, they didn't know what expression to use. Everyone knew that Prince Ding wasn't in a good position. If he wanted to mobilize the Black Cloud cavalries, he couldn't do it without Ding's consort. But if such a delicate and slender woman really had the ability to command such a strong army and lead them against hundreds of thousands of Prince Li's rebel army, the two didn't have much confidence in their hearts. This subordinate requests to see consort. An air and Insan's voice came from outside the door. Xiaoshu and Yunting were stunned. They looked outside the door vigilantly. A few men wearing normal soldier uniforms walked in. Even though the uniforms of Dechu State soldiers were similar, Xiaoshu could still see the insignia on these people's uniforms. They were obviously Prince Li's soldiers. These people were obviously not let in by the soldiers guarding the city. You've worked hard. How did it go? An heir stepped forward and said, following consort's orders, we've already executed the Yongzhou governor. It's a pity that Prince Li has many subordinates and this subordinate was unable to bring back the Yongzhou governor's head. Asking for consort's forgiveness. Yili raised her hand. It's fine. You did very well. Go and rest. Everyone left. Yunting said in shock, You killed the Yongzhou governor. Chapter 212. Yunting, don't be rude, Xiaoshu said in a deep voice. Xiaoshu said in a deep voice. Since they could confirm that the woman in front of them was the imperial concubine, regardless of whether she had the ability to lead the Black Cloud cavalry and the Yonglin army, she was not someone they could be rude to. Although he was also shocked by what he heard just now. Yili nodded slightly and said, the Yongzhou governor did not want to serve the country and surrendered to Prince Li. If we don't deal with him seriously, I'm afraid other officials will be persuaded by him and follow his example. Xiaoshu nodded and said, what Wang Fei said is right. If the Yongzhou governor did not betray Prince Li, Yonglin army would not be trapped today. Yunting looked at Xiaoshu and then looked at Yili. He suddenly asked, Princess, when will the reinforcements arrive? Yili pondered for a moment and shook her head, I don't know. I was in Nanzhao before. After hearing the news of Shattered Snow Pass, I rushed back. But Yongzhou army commander Wu was ambushed at the Cloud River. I'm afraid there won't be any reinforcements in the next few days. It was good enough that the entire south of the Cloud River could protect themselves. There was no need to think about reinforcements. In Jiangbei, only Yongzhou was the closest to Yongzhou. If the Yongzhou army was ambushed, the other army would not come out without receiving the imperial edict. Soldiers. Yunting and Xiaoshu were the commanders of the Yonglin army. They were not ordinary soldiers, so Yili had no intention to deceive them. If the commander could not see the situation clearly, there was no need to mention anything else. Damn it! Yunting cursed in a low voice. Even with the addition of the 2,000 Black Cloud cavalry, they had less than 20,000 men. Even if they were not afraid of death, if they could defend Yonglin army by fighting all of them, he would rather die on the battlefield. Xiaoshu slowly took a breath and calmed himself down before asking, in this case, Princess, please leave Yonglin army and return to the capital as soon as possible. Yili raised her eyebrows and asked. Xiaoshu smiled bitterly, to tell you the truth. Although we have made a military order in front of General Murong, we are not qualified. Power Yonglin. We can only do our best to defend for as long as we can. This one has heard of the grudge between Princess Consort and Prince Li. What if when the time comes? So please leave as soon as possible. Yili revealed a smile. Commandant Xia, did you think that this consort came to Yonglin to stroll around here and then leave? Moreover, even if I leave the Black Cloud cavalry to you, will you be able to command them? Xiaoshu looked at Yili guiltily. He did have this idea. He hoped that Princess Ding could leave the Black Cloud cavalry behind to help defend the city. However, Princess Ding was right. If even the past emperors could not touch the Black Cloud cavalry, then how could he, a mere military officer, command them? Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a smile. What's wrong? Did I embarrass you by defending the city with you? This. Xiaoshu was speechless. Yunting said straightforwardly, Princess Consort, the battlefield is too dangerous. You have a noble status and you are a girl. How can we let you defend the city with us? Why don't you talk to the brothers of the Black Cloud cavalry and stay behind to help us defend the city? This way you will be safe and we will have more confidence in defending the city. Yili giggled and covered her mouth. Commandant Yun, I rode in by myself just now. I didn't sit in a sedan and let people carry me in, right? Yun Ting was stunned. Only now did he remember that in the chaos just now, there was indeed no one who was protecting anyone. So this girl who didn't even reach his shoulder was actually someone who had followed all the Black Cloud cavalry and killed their way out of the army? Xiaoshu coughed lightly and cupped his hands towards Yili. This one has been rude. General Murong is at Shattered Snow Pass. Why don't we ask Princess Consort to see General Murong first before making a plan? Yili frowned and thought for a moment. She nodded. That is good. The rebel army has suffered setbacks in the past 2 days. Right now they have retreated. 20 Li Mo Jingli will not advance rashly before investigating clearly. Since I am here, it is not right if I don't see General Murong. Let's go to Shattered Snow Pass first. Yunting volunteered. I will send Princess Consort over. Xiaoshu looked at Yunting with a faint smile. As if he understood what he was thinking, he smiled tolerantly. I will stay behind to guard Yonglin. Yili nodded. Then I will have to trouble Commandant Xia. I will leave the Black Cloud cavalry to help Commandant Xia strengthen the city walls. Xiaoshu was overjoyed. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud cavalry was good at attacking, but at the same time, those who were good at attacking would know where the weakness of the defense was. It was every soldier's honor to be able to observe the Black Cloud cavalry at a close distance. Hearing this, Yunting was in a dilemma. Was it better for Princess Ding to see General Murong, or was it better to stay behind to watch the Black Cloud cavalry? Looking at Yili, who had stood up, Commandant Yunting clenched his fist in his heart. It was absolutely necessary to please Princess Ding first. If after this battle he could ask Princess Ding to take him into the Black Cloud cavalry. Even if he was a small soldier, he was willing. Shattered Snow Pass. Covered in blood, Murong Shen walked into the tent with a majestic gait. As if they knew that Prince Li's rebel army was approaching, the Nanzhao people's attack became more and more intense. In the end, Murong Shen personally led people out of the city and fought for a long time to kill them back. Now he could finally take a breath. Murong Shen did not even have time to change his clothes before he hurried back to the tent to listen to the battle report of Yonglin City. General, this morning, Prince Li personally led 150,000 troops and horses and arrived at Yonglin City. Murong Shen waved his hand and said, Nonsense. There's only so much space outside Yonglin City. Where is he going to place his 150,000 troops? One of his subordinates stood up and said, I'm afraid that the 150,000 troops are prepared for our Shattered Snow Pass. Yesterday Yunting and Xiaoshu killed Prince Li's vanguard and killed the vanguard who opened the way. Today those two brats will not have a good time. Murong Shen nodded and said, Yunting and Xiaoshu fought well this time. General, why don't I take people to Yonglin City to have a look? I'm afraid that those two brats can't hold on today. A middle-aged deputy general said with some worry. Murong Shen shook his head with a heavy expression. The Nanzhao army will attack at any time. Besides, we can't spare more troops to support them. All the generals were silent. Transferring people from Shattered Snow Pass was equivalent to letting the Nanzhao people into Shattered Snow Pass. If they did not transfer people, the 20,000 people in Yonglin City would be eaten by Prince Li's army sooner or later. At that time, they would not be able to hold Shattered Snow Pass even if they surrounded it from both sides. And the sad thing was, they could not even break out of the encirclement because they were guarding Shattered Snow Pass, which was the gate of Dechu State. Unless all the soldiers in Shattered Snow Pass were killed, they would never let the foreigners take a step in. This was the belief that generations of guardians of Shattered Snow Pass had used their lives and blood to forge. Damn it! Prince Li actually colluded with the Nanzhao people. The bad-tempered generals could not help cursing. What could be more depressing than being stabbed in the back by your own people when you were fighting for your life in front of a bloody storm? How could the dignified prince of the royal family, the brother of the emperor, collude with foreigners? Chapter 213. General, the battle report of Yonglin City. Send it in. The cursing in the tent stopped abruptly. Everyone looked at the soldier who came in with the report seriously, for fear of hearing bad news from him. General, the rebel army of King Li attacked the city for 2 hours this morning. At noon, the rebel army was defeated. Lieutenant Xia asked the general to rest assured that as long as there is a soldier in Yonglin City, the rebel army will never cross the city. The soldier reported loudly. Great, these 2 boys are really good. Murongshin was overjoyed. In fact, he was a little nervous about sending Yunting and Xiaoshu to Yonglin City before. After all, they were too young, but there was no one to send in Shattering Snow Pass. He didn't expect that these 2 boys could win 2 days in a row. After thinking for a while, Murongshin asked with some doubts. King Li's army of more than 100,000 has been exhausted. How did Yunting and Xiaoshu defeat them? The soldier didn't hide it. We couldn't hold on at first, but suddenly many cavalrymen in black appeared out of nowhere and defeated the enemy. In addition, the governor of Yongzhou was also killed in King Li's army. Murongshin was stunned. He couldn't figure out the identity of these cavalrymen in black, but it was a good thing that the governor of Yongzhou was killed. Good. Go back and check the information of those cavalrymen. Send it to me as soon as possible. Yes. General Lieutenant Yunting wants to see you. Yunting? Why is he here? Let him in. Murongshin frowned and waved his hand to order. Not long after, Yunting came in a hurry. As soon as he entered the door, he shouted to Murongshin, General, look who this is. Murongshin was about to reprimand Yunting for his impetuousness, but when he looked up he couldn't say anything for a long time. Murongshin didn't like to socialize in the capital, and Yili didn't like to go out either. But Murongting and Yili were really good friends. Therefore General Murong, who loved his daughter as much as his own life, had seen this famous princess Ding a few times. Although the other party was dressed in black and was dressed as a man, Murongshin had a deep impression of her beautiful face and calm smile. Wong. Murongshin tried his best to swallow the rest of the word, only to hear Yili salute him with a smile. General Murong, how have you been since we parted in the capital? After all, Murongshin was a general who had been on the battlefield for half of his life. He quickly regained his composure and returned the greeting with a smile. Thank you for your concern. I would like to thank you for your help in resolving the crisis of Yonglin. The black-clad cavalryman saw the princess consort of Ding who suddenly appeared here. If Murongshin couldn't guess who saved Yonglin, he wouldn't be Murongshin who had fought with Mo Lufeng. Although the generals in Shattering Snow Pass didn't know who the black-clad young man who came with Yunting who saved Yonglin was, they clearly sensed that General Murong knew this person, so they also relaxed their guard and looked at Yili curiously. Murongshin looked at the crowd, waved his hand to let them leave, and then invited Yili to sit down. Yili didn't stand on ceremony. After thanking him, she walked to one side and sat down. General, can Shattering Snow Pass be defended? Yili knew Murongshin's temper very well and didn't want to waste time with him, so she asked directly. Murongshin looked deeply at Yili, sighed after a while and said, I won't hide it from you, princess. If there weren't Prince Li's hundreds of thousands of troops behind me, Murongshin dares to guarantee that the people of Nanjiang would never step into Shattering Snow Pass. But, once Yonglin City is breached, Shattering Snow Pass may not be able to defend for even half a day. There was no barrier between Shattering Snow Pass and Yonglin City. Once the rebel army passed Yonglin City, it was equal to leaving the defending army behind for the rebel army to attack. At that time, the defending army of Shattering Snow Pass would be wiped out without any effort from Nanjiao people. Yili naturally understood that Murongshin was telling the truth. She frowned and said, in your opinion, how long will it take for the reinforcements to arrive? Murongshin smiled bitterly. If, at most 2 days, the reinforcements will arrive. But now, within 10 days, we won't even see half a shadow of the reinforcements. Yili raised her eyebrows. So you mean that Shattering Snow Pass can't be defended? Murongshin gritted his teeth and said, we have to defend even if we can't. As long as Murongshin is still alive, Nanjiao people won't be able to pass through Shattering Snow Pass. Yili was silent for a moment and then raised her head and asked, How long do you think we can defend? Murong-shin said in a low voice, that depends on how long Yonglin can last. How many Black Cloud cavalry did Princess bring this time? Yili sighed, this time it's purely a coincidence. The Black Cloud cavalry only has 2,000 people. General, if Shattering Snow Pass can't be defended, can we retreat to Yunlin River? Murong-shin waved his hand and said firmly, others can retreat but Murong-shin can't. Since His Majesty has sent Murong-shin to guard Shattering Snow Pass, I can only live and die with Shattering Snow Pass. Yili frowned and said, then have you thought about what will happen if Nanjiang people take advantage of the situation and march north after Shattering Snow Pass is broken? The 20,000 defending troops of Yongzhou have been wiped out at Yunlin River. At this time not only is Yongzhou in danger, Yongzhou also has no troops to guard it. Murong-shin laughed and said proudly, don't worry, Princess. After receiving the news of Commander Wu's death, I thought of this point. So I've ordered people to monitor Henghui Bridge at Yunlin River day and night. If the reinforcements arrive first, then it's fine. But once Shattering Snow Pass is broken and the reinforcements haven't arrived, the people left there will destroy the bridge at all costs. No matter if Nanzhao people want to rebuild the bridge, cross the river by boat or take a detour, the journey will be delayed for at least half a month. At that time, the reinforcements of the imperial court should arrive. But Princess, thank you for your help this time. Please leave Yongzhou as soon as possible for your safety. Yili stood up and saluted Murong-shin with admiration. Since General has made up his mind, then, how about leaving Yonglin City to me? Princess. Murong-shin looked at her in surprise. Yili smiled and said, since I'm the Princess of Ding Country, how can I leave Yongzhou when it's in danger? Yili is also willing to live and die with Yonglin City, so as to live up to the name of Ding Country. Isn't that right? Murong-shin was silent for a long time before he finally said, no wonder. No wonder the Black Cloud cavalry would listen to Princess Ding's command. She was indeed not an ordinary lady. Everyone thought that only Prince Ding and Princess Ding could command the Black Cloud cavalry. But they didn't know that even among the past Princess Ding, there were only 2 or 3 people who could really command the Black Cloud cavalry. Not to mention the former Princess Ding, even Prince Ding's birth mother, the princess who was deeply in love with Prince Regent Mo Lufeng, also never had the right to command the Black Cloud cavalry. Yili raised her eyebrows and waited for Murong-shin's words. Murong-shin just shook his head and didn't say anything. He just looked up at Yili and said, so Yonglin City will be entrusted to Princess. I can't help Princess with anything, so I can only send another 10,000 people to Princess. These 10,000 people were supposed to be sent to reinforce Yunting and Xiaoshu when they couldn't hold on anymore. It was also the only people he could send. Chapter 214. Yili nodded, thank you for your trust, General. After receiving Murong-shin's commander's seal, Yili didn't delay any longer. She got up and prepared to return to Yonglin City. Murong-shin was a veteran on the battlefield. If it weren't for the sudden attack and the great disparity in strength, they wouldn't be so stretched. Naturally, Yili didn't need to meddle in the defense of Shattered Snow Pass. When she got out of the military camp, she saw Murong-ting walking towards her with a sword. Murong-ting was in a hurry to find her father, but she stopped when she heard a familiar voice. She stared at the familiar yet strange person in front of her for a long time before she came to herself and pointed at her. You, how dare you? Murong-shin came out behind her and glared at Murong-ting. How can you be so rude to Child Su? Child Su! Murong-ting screamed. Yili smiled and raised her eyebrows at Murong-ting. I'm Su Qinglu. Nice to meet you, Miss Murong. Murong-ting blushed and quickly hid behind Murong-shin. She glared at Yili with resentment. Yili couldn't be blamed for suddenly becoming thin-skinned. She could only blame the man she was with for looking too good. Even if he didn't put on makeup to change his appearance, he still looked like a handsome and slightly childish young man. He didn't have the slightest bit of a girl's delicate appearance. Murong-ting had always boasted of her heroic character, but she had to admit that even if she wore men's clothes, she wouldn't look more like a boy than the person in front of her. Even though she knew that Yili was a real woman, Murong-ting couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when she saw a handsome young man with a naive and childish look in her heart. Looking at Murong-ting's rare blush, Yili couldn't help but smile at her. The young man in the sun was handsome and elegant. His black clothes couldn't hide his clean and clear childishness. Murong-ting could only stare at him more widely and scold him in her heart. Evildoer. General, I'll leave first. Yili didn't want to provoke Murong-ting anymore. She turned around and said goodbye to Murong-shen. Murong-shen nodded and said cautiously, in that case, please take care of Yonglin City. I won't let you down. Yili smiled. Murong-ting looked at Yili and rolled her eyes. Father, why is young Master Su going to Yonglin? Murong-shen frowned and said, young Master Su is going to help Yun-ting and Xiaoshu defend the city. Murong-ting quickly said, I want to go too. Stop fooling around. Young Master Su is going to do something serious. Why are you following him? Murong-ting was so angry that she stomped her feet. Previously he said that she was a girl and could not go to the battlefield. Now wasn't he asking Lili to go to the battlefield? I don't care, I also want to help defend the city. I'm Daddy's daughter, not a useless person who only knows how to eat for free in the barracks. But, young Master Su, can you take me with you? Being so excited, Murong-ting forgot that Yili was still wearing men's clothes. She directly jumped on him and shook his sleeves, which attracted the attention of the soldiers passing by. Yili coughed softly, pulled her hands away and said with a smile, Murong, men and women are different. Murong-ting just noticed the strange eyes of the soldiers passing by. She quickly let go of her hands and made a face at Yili. She turned back and pulled her father to act like a spoiled child. Father, let Ting go. I will never make trouble for others. Murong-shen was pestered by her and had no choice but to look at Yili. Yili lowered her head and said with a smile, if you don't worry, General, let Murong go with me. Murong-shen sighed. Now the situation was critical. There was not much difference between staying in Shattered Snow Pass and going to Yonglin City. Even if she stayed in Shattered Snow Pass, he could not take care of her when the battle really started. Well, I'll have to trouble young Master Su to take care of this girl. If she dares to be willful and mischievous, young Master Su can punish her according to military law. You don't have to be merciful. Thank you, Father. Murong-ting was overjoyed. She did not care about the military law that her father said later. At least this meant that her father was willing to treat her as a soldier and not as an insensible little girl, right? Thank you, Father. Murong-ting was overjoyed. She did not care about the military law that her father said later. At least this meant that her father was willing to treat her as a soldier and not as an insensible little girl, right? After bidding farewell to Murong-shen, Yili and the others stopped in front of Shattered Snow Pass for less than 2 hours and then started to go back. Murong-ting rode on the back of the horse and looked at Yili's horse and the few Black Cloud cavalry soldiers behind her with envy. Only a few people had such an imposing manner. If the whole Black Cloud cavalry was in front of her, what a magnificent scene it would be. Just thinking about it made her blood boil. Young Master Su, why did you come to Shattered Snow Pass? My father is really not worried about you. No matter what I said, he would not let me go to the battlefield. But when you came, he was actually willing to hand over the defense of Yonglin to you. Thinking of this, Murong-ting could not help but feel a little sour in her heart. Did her father really think that she was very useless, so he was unwilling to let her go to the battlefield? Yili smiled and said, I went to the southern border to settle some matters and coincidentally met you. Prince is actually willing to let you go to the southern border alone to settle some matters? Prince is really a good person. Not like my father, who always nags me that when a girl gets married, she has to stay at home obediently to do the housework and be virtuous. I don't want to stay at home obediently. Murong-ting complained softly in dissatisfaction. Her last sentence was so soft that it was almost like a whisper. However, everyone present had excellent hearing. Naturally, they all heard it clearly. Yun-ting smiled and said, Miss Murong, if you say that, young Master Lung will cry. Murong-ting bared her teeth and snorted at Yun-ting. Then she patted her horse and ran to the front. Yili smiled and followed her. She smiled and said, General Murong also dotes on you and is afraid that you will be in danger. I know, but my father only has one daughter. I also want my father to be proud of me. Also, I am not a child. I will not act impulsively. My father does not allow me to go to the battlefield. No matter how anxious I am, I will not secretly go behind his back. Yili nodded. Although Murong-ting was occasionally willful, she knew her limits and would not let others really worry about her. When they returned to Yonglin City, Xiaoshu had already followed several commanders of Black Cloud cavalry to reinforce the defense of Yonglin City. Yun-ting had long been itching to do so. When he returned to the city, he told Yili that he did not have time to entertain her, the princess consort of Dingwa, and he also ran around. Murongting had no interest in Yili sitting in the study and reading a lot of files and maps. She turned her eyes and ran to find some young and strong men and clever women in the city, preparing to organize them. When the war came, although they could not go to the battlefield, it was not a problem for them to help take care of the wounded soldiers and deal with the logistics. Yili also agreed with her idea. Murongting, who had been restrained by Murongshan for a long time, was even happier. She went with a smile. Yili sat in the specially vacated study, looking at the map in front of her and frowning. She was obviously not a genius, at least not in commanding a large-scale battle. As a special soldier in her previous life, she was better at local small group battles and attacking the enemy's key points. Now, in the situation where they did not have the advantage of time or even the geographical advantage, they had to face the siege of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses. Let alone turning defeat into victory, they would be happy if they could successfully defend until the reinforcements arrived. The shattered snow pass, which had not been broken by foreigners for hundreds of years, obviously gave Yonglin City a very safe feeling. Therefore, the defensive ability of the city wall of Yonglin City was not good at all, let alone the internal defense. Who would have thought that the soldiers stationed in the shattered snow pass would one day have to face the attack from Dachu State? Chapter 215. Greetings to Princess Consort. Xiaoshu, Yunting and the others came together. They stood at the door and bowed to Yili. Yili waved to everyone without turning her head and said, "Come in, how is it?" Yunting, who had the most straightforward personality, smiled and said, "Thanks to the help of the Black Cloud Cavalry brothers, we have strengthened the city's defenses." The Black Cloud Cavalry commander who came together shook his head and said, "Yonglin City's foundation is too weak. Even if we strengthen it, it won't last long. Yesterday's attack could only be considered as a test. When the next attack starts, it won't be so easy to stop." Yili raised her head and frowned slightly, saying, "The rebel army probably won't attack in these 2 days, but we still have to be on guard. You all have to be careful." Yesterday they deliberately deceived Mo Jingli. Before Mo Jingli figured out how many people they had, Mo Jingli wouldn't attack easily. But the trick wouldn't last long. Once Mo Jingli found out the truth, they would only be welcomed with a stronger attack. "Yunting, Xiaoshu, you guys are familiar with the surroundings. Come and look at this map." Yunting and Xiaoshu went forward curiously. A large map was unfolded on the desk in front of Yili. On the top, there was a line of beautiful words written on it, Yonglin Topography Map. Yunting and Xiaoshu quickly discovered that this map didn't just include Yonglin City. It included almost all the topography of Yonglin City and Fujin within a 100-li radius. It also included shattered snow pass and parts of Nanjiang. Most importantly, this map was clearly newly drawn. Yunting asked in confusion, "Does Princess Consort need a map? We still have a few maps here." Shattered Snow Pass also has a map of Yongzhou. Yili shook her head. Neither she nor the Black Cloud Cavalry were familiar with Yongzhou, and it was a big taboo to not be familiar with the terrain in war. Thus, when she was still in the southern border, she had already sent a message to the Black Cloud Cavalry to collect information on the terrain near Yonglin. It was only until last night that she was able to draw them out with reference to the original map. However, she didn't check most of the areas herself, which made the map more uncertain. Therefore, she wanted Yunting and Xiaoshu, who were familiar with the local area, to have a look. Xiaoshu stared at the drawing seriously for a long time, and his eyes were filled with fanaticism. He praised softly, "Is this drawn by the princess herself?" Yili rubbed her forehead and said, "Although I believe in the soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry, I didn't see it for myself. Look at this map and see if there is anything wrong with it." Xiaoshu looked at it for a long time, then pointed to a place marked with a river on the map and said, "Here, if this river is closer to this mountain, there will probably be no problem." Yili picked up the pen again and asked, "What is the distance between this river and this mountain?" Xiaoshu lowered his head and silently calculated, "About 3 miles. Yili raised her eyebrows. The difference was indeed a bit far. For something like a map, the slightest mistake was the difference of 1,000 miles. She picked up the pen and started to edit the drawing. Xiaoshu was full of praise as he watched. He admired this princess consort from the bottom of his heart. Other things aside, something like a map, even if someone had personally walked through all the places, they might not be able to draw it. Furthermore, Princess Ding could draw it almost exactly from hearing about it. This map was at least 10 times clearer and more detailed than the one they had now. What did war rely on? Other than the art of war, wasn't it the right time in the right place? However, not everyone who led an army had the opportunity to explore all the places they were going to fight. Basically, with this map they could see everything within 100 miles of Yonglin clearly. Princess, are we just going to wait for the rebel army to attack the city? Yunting asked impatiently. Yili smiled and said, "What was your original plan?" Yunting was a bit embarrassed. Originally, they could only wait for the rebel army to attack the city. It wasn't that they were willing to do so, but they were limited by their military strength. However, didn't they have 2,000 Black Cloud cavalry now? The Black Cloud cavalry wasn't good at defending but attacking, right? Of course he didn't like defending either. Yonglin is surrounded by mountains and forests. The cavalry's abilities are greatly restricted. Xiaoshu frowned and said. It was the first time in his life that he saw the mountains and forests on the map and felt annoyed. If it was a flat land, the Black Cloud cavalry wouldn't be able to do this much. However, he also knew that if it was a flat land and the rebel army all attacked the city, they wouldn't be able to pass. The Black Cloud cavalry commander sneered and said, although the Black Cloud cavalry is called cavalry, they aren't only good at riding and archery. The cavalry was mainly used to deal with the northern tribes. However, the horses of the Dechu state couldn't compare to the horses of the northern tribes. Although the Black Cloud cavalry were all elites, if they wanted to fight with the northern tribes' cavalry, it would definitely not be good for either side. Xiaoshu looked at the arrogant Black Cloud cavalry commander and the silent Air and Insan and said hesitantly, "Can we attack first and mess up their plans?" Yili raised his eyebrows. "Tell me about it." Xiaoshu picked up the charcoal pencil and marked on the map while saying, "The rebel army has set up camp 20 miles away from Yonglin. If we sneak attack with our cavalry, we should be able to catch them off guard." Air said, "The cavalry's movements are too big. If we want speed, we will be discovered before we even get close to the camp. Also, using 2,000 to sneak attack a camp of over 100,000? If they were truly caught in a huge battle, the Black Cloud cavalry might not be able to escape unscathed." Xiaoshu shook his head and said, "We don't need to sneak attack their camp. The terrain of Yonglin means that they definitely won't be able to station all of their troops in one place. If the rebel army camp is here, then there will definitely be some troops stationed here and here to form a horn and protect the camp. There shouldn't be more than 10,000 troops stationed in these two places. Perhaps we can create some chaos?" Qin Feng? Yili raised his eyebrows and asked the Black Cloud cavalry commander. Qin Feng said with a frown, "If it really is like this, then we can cut off the left wing's path to the camp and completely wipe out this group of people. Even if we can't, this mountain path isn't too wide and the enemy's reinforcements won't come too quickly. We will have time to retreat. Only this way the enemy might suspect that the main force of the Black Cloud cavalry isn't even in Yongzhou." Yili blinked his eyes and asked with a smile, "What if the left and right wings are wiped out?" Everyone's eyes fell on Yili. Wiping out one side was already hard enough. How was it possible to wipe out both sides? Air and San quickly gather all the information on Mo Jingli's camp. Yili ordered. Air and Insan nodded and left the study. For 2 consecutive days, because he didn't receive any news from the Black Cloud cavalry, Mo Jingli could only bide his time. Every time he saw the few Black Cloud cavalry on Yonglin City, Mo Jingli would always feel suspicious. In reality, there weren't many Black Cloud cavalry in Yongzhou and Mo Shuyao wasn't even in Yongzhou. However, right when he wanted to make the decision to attack, he felt that this might be Mo Xuyao's plan to lure him into a trap. Mo Xuyao had always been crafty, so he couldn't help but be on guard. That was why even though Nanzhao had already sent people to urge him to attack, he could only bring over 100,000 troops to face off in front of this small Yonglin city. Chapter 216. Prince, Nanzhao has urged us many times. Are we attacking Yonglin tomorrow? In the tent, a middle-aged military man asked. Mo Jingli frowned. What's the hurry? If they're in such a hurry, why don't they attack Shattering Snow Pass themselves? They've fought for so many days and they haven't even scratched Murong Shin's skin. The military advisor shook his head with a helpless smile. The walls of Shattering Snow Pass are strong and hard to break since ancient times. It's reasonable that they can't take it. Emo Jingli was a little hesitant. He frowned and looked at the military counselor, asking, "Is it really useful to let the Nanzhao people in?" The military counselor was slightly startled and looked at him in confusion. "Your Highness, what do you mean?" Emo Jingli snorted softly. "We didn't need the Nanzhao people to spend any effort to sweep Yongzhou. Once they enter Shattering Snow Pass, I'm afraid it's easier to invite them in than to send them away." Although the Nanzhao people were cooperating with him now, he knew that they weren't so honest. Once the legend of Shattering Snow Pass was destroyed, these people would challenge Shattering Snow Pass more frequently in the future and invade Dechu State's territory. "Prince, there's no turning back," the military advisor advised. "Once we break the agreement, the Nanzhao people will retreat immediately. Then Murongshan will turn around to deal with us. When the imperial court's reinforcements arrive, the consequences will be unimaginable. So, Prince, it's better to end the battle quickly." Emo Jingli nodded. How could he not understand this? "Why do you think the Black Cloud cavalry came so quickly?" The military advisor said awkwardly. "Prince Ding has always been far-sighted. In these 2 days, we haven't found any trace of the Black Cloud cavalry. I'm afraid that Prince Ding planted a hidden chess piece here earlier." Thinking of this, the military advisor couldn't help but wring his hands. If it weren't for the Black Cloud cavalry, Yonglin City would have been theirs. Perhaps even Shattering Snow Pass would have been broken. "You're saying that Emo Shuyao predicted that there would be a war in Nanjiang?" Emo Jingli asked with an ugly expression. The military advisor did not dare to admit it and only said, "Perhaps it was left behind by Prince Ding to guard against Nanzhao. After all, Prince Ding fought very fiercely in Nanjiang back then." If the imperial family had not been worried that the young general of the Prince Ding mansion was too famous at that time and that his military exploits were too great, they would have retreated. The present Nanzhao probably no longer existed. Nanzhao's hatred of Prince Ding went without saying. Prince Ding probably also viewed the resurgent Nanzhao as a thorn in his side. Emo Jingli curled his lips in disdain. Emo Shuyao claims to be a godly strategist, yet he still hasn't been able to conquer Nanjiang even after fighting for a year. "I swept through Yongzhou in less than half a month. In at most half a year we will be able to conquer the entire south of the Cloud Mist River." "Prince is wise," military counselor said with a smile as he wiped his sweat without a trace. The fact that everything went so smoothly this time was definitely because the heavens were helping them. Ever since Murongshan guarded Broken Snow Pass, the emperor had used all kinds of methods to reduce the military strength of Yongzhou. The governor of Yongzhou spared no effort to find trouble for Murongshan. That was why Yongzhou's defense was empty. And this time they had attacked unexpectedly, which was why their journey had been so smooth. In the future, when the imperial court reacted, it would not be so smooth. However, Prince was right. As long as they destroyed Murongshan in Broken Snow Pass, the south of the Cloud Mist River would indeed be in their pocket. Reporting to Prince. The Western army was attacked. The soldier outside the tent hurriedly reported in a loud voice. Emo Jingli was startled. He suddenly got up and walked out of the tent to look into the distance. Sure enough, he saw a sea of fire in the west. Bastard! How could Yonglin City still have the military strength to launch a sneak attack? Military counselor followed behind him. When he saw the situation in the west, he was also startled. He quickly reminded, "Prince." Emo Jingli said coldly, "Send reinforcements." "Prince, look over there." The generals who hurried over screamed. At the same time, the camp in the east was also lit up. One of them said in horror, "The east camp was also attacked." Military counselor's eyes flashed. He said in a low voice, "Prince, Yonglin City doesn't have many soldiers and horses. If we want to attack the east and west camps at the same time, the city must be empty. If we take the opportunity to attack the city now." Emo Jingli suddenly turned back and stared at him. "Do you think the two guys in Yonglin City have the guts to attack Yonglin City at night?" He was not familiar with Yun Ting and Xia Shu, but they were not strangers either. It was said that they were the two youngest captains under Murongshan. Two captains in their early 20s, even if they were given the courage, they would not dare to leave Yonglin City alone and take the risk. What was more, as long as one was not an idiot, he knew that even if the night attack succeeded, it was impossible to defeat hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Instead, it would exhaust the defense forces of Yonglin City. Prince means. Military counselor frowned. Sends spies to investigate. General Zhang, General Li reinforce the east and west camps. Yes. Prince. On a mountain peak not far from Prince Li's camp, Yili lowered her head and looked at the smoke and fire at the foot of the mountain with satisfaction. Xia Shu and Air and Insan followed Yili together and looked at the scene at the foot of the mountain. The reinforcements are coming. Xia Shu pointed at a group of people on the road at the foot of the mountain and quickly moved in the direction of the west camp. Yili lowered her eyebrows and smiled. The west camp is about to end, right? Let someone lead them around a few times. Xia Shu smiled and said, of course, if we talk about the terrain, the locals who have been stationed here all year round are more familiar with it. I'm afraid that the east camp won't be able to hold on for much longer. Yili said, let them deal with the people there by themselves. Let the Shadow Guard prepare. I don't want Mo Jingli to send reinforcements again. If they ate too much they would be choked to death. And San smiled and said, Princess, don't worry. The Shadow Guard can't fight, but they can definitely make trouble. The rebels would never have thought that their own people would come out from behind them. If they were attacked from behind in the dark, they would be prepared to fight to the death. Thanks to Prince Li, they didn't have time to change their appearance. The rebels not only had weapons but also had clothes similar to the Yonglin army. As for whether they could see the emblem of Prince Li's fief in the dark valley, it would depend on their luck. Yili nodded with satisfaction. Let's go and have a look. The four of them got on the horses that were parked not far away and quietly ran to another mountain in the dark night. Could be foreseen that there would be a more exciting battle there. No one could avoid this night. The battle didn't stop until the sky was getting brighter. As a result, Mo Jingli's gloomy face became even darker. The east camp and the west camp, together with the reinforcements sent out, were close to 30,000 people. Nearly 70 to 80% of them were killed or injured. And the other side left less than 3,000 corpses. As for the valley behind the east camp, it was almost completely filled with his own people. If he still couldn't guess what happened, he would be an idiot. In one night they lost more than 20,000 soldiers. The commanders of the east and west camps and the two generals who were sent as reinforcements also died. This was a shocking blow to the originally high morale of Prince Li's army. Unknowingly, the news that Prince Ding and his Black Cloud cavalry were in Yonglin City secretly spread in the Li army. Almost all the soldiers couldn't help but panic. Prince Ding's residence and the Black Cloud cavalry definitely had an unshakable deterrent force in the hearts of every soldier. At this time Yonglin City was indeed full of joy. The great victory this time made Enchanting walk with the wind. Chapter 217. Don't be happy too early. When Mo Jingli figures out the truth, I'm afraid no one will be able to stop his army. Yili said helplessly. Enchanting said excitedly, why don't we sneak attack a few more times? Xia Shu rolled her eyes at him. Do you think that Prince Li's subordinates are all idiots? After being sneak attacked once they will let you succeed again? Maybe they are waiting for you to walk right into their trap. Yili nodded and said, Xia Shu is right. This time we are indeed taking a risk. If Mo Jingli reacts and directly attacks Yonglin, then even if we can kill 20 to 30,000 rebels, it will be useless. Enchanting also gradually recovered from his excitement, biting his fingers anxiously. Then what should we do? Damn it, when will the imperial court's reinforcements arrive? Princess. Insan came in with a letter. Yili nodded and said to the two, you can go do your work first. Enchanting and Xia Shu respectfully left. Yili took the letter from Insan and opened it. At first she was happy, but soon her face sank. Insan looked strangely at Yili's change in expression. She didn't know what was written in the letter to make the usually calm princess consort act so strangely. After a while, Yili slapped the letter on the table and said, pass down the order from today onwards, the entire army will be on alert. Princess consort, what's wrong? Yili said, Mo Jingli is very likely to attack Yonglin within these 2 days. Insan didn't understand. According to their predictions, the rebel army shouldn't move at all in these few days. Yili looked at the letter on the table and said, the reinforcements will arrive at Yunlan River within 3 days. Not long after, Mo Jingli will also receive this news. If he doesn't attack Yonglin at this time, once the reinforcements arrive he will have no chance. And San nodded, so, As long as we can hold on for these 3 days. I'm just afraid that these 3 days won't be easy. In King Li's army, Mo Jingli stared at the secret letter in his hand as if he wanted to bore a hole through it. After a while he angrily said, Good Black Cloud Cavalry. I want to know which expert is in Yonglin City. It was written clearly in the secret letter that Mo Shuyao went to the palace to see Mo Jingqi 10 days ago. Even if he had left the capital at that time, he couldn't have arrived in Yongzhou in such a short time. Therefore, the one blocking his path in the past few days was definitely not that cripple Mo Shuyao. As for the Black Cloud Cavalry, other than the 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry in Yonglin City, they had searched the entire Yongzhou and did not find a single trace of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Prince, now. The military advisor's expression was grave. The reinforcements are coming so quickly. They will cross the Cloud River in at most 3 days. Prince, please make a decision as soon as possible. Their eyes landed on the slender figure in the distance. Yili was dressed in a moon-white male outfit. She didn't have a hairpin in her hair. Instead, she used a moon-white ribbon to casually tie it up. Under the moonlight, her sparkling face was covered in a layer of faint silver light. It seemed to be a trace of pure melancholy. Her aura that was as quiet as a lotus and elegant as an orchid made the young girl in red clothes beside her lose her splendor. If I can survive this time, I will definitely join the Black Cloud Cavalry, Yunting said firmly. Joining the Black Cloud Cavalry had always been his wish. It was just that he was even more determined now. If we can't defend tomorrow, you can escort the princess consort and leave first. Head towards the north. After passing the Cloud Mist River, you should be able to meet the reinforcements soon. Xiaoshu said faintly. Yunting glared at him and said, Am I someone who would run away before the battle? Xiaoshu faintly swept a glance over him. You don't know the relationship between the princess consort and King Li? What will happen if she falls into King Li's hands? Yunting stilled. He couldn't help but look at the woman standing in the wind. He scratched his head in annoyance and said, I don't have the ability to escort the princess consort away. You should go. You are better at persuading people. The princess consort doesn't look like she would abandon Yonglin City and leave by herself. Speaking of which, I really haven't seen such a princess consort before. Xiaoshu nodded in agreement. Even though they had only known each other for a few days, this Princess Ding who was younger than them had completely subverted their understanding of the title of princess consort. She looked weak on the outside, but her heart was stronger than men. There was also his astonishing intellect, his sharp decisiveness as a general, and his agility that was greater than many other generals. Many times Xiaoshu felt that the woman wasn't a pampered princess consort, but a soldier who had experienced hundreds of battles. Say, if we both survive and I ask the princess consort to accept me into the Black Cloud Cavalry, will the princess consort agree? Don't think about problems that can't be solved first. This had always been Yunting's habit. Tilting his head, Yunting began to imagine a beautiful future. Chapter 218. Xiaoshu thought for a bit and smiled faintly. Maybe you can ask Princess Ding if the Black Cloud Cavalry is still accepting people. Yunting's eyes lit up as he looked at the moon-white figure who was talking to Murongting not far away. Xiaoshu shook his head helplessly and turned to walk down the city tower as he said, Go back and rest. Don't forget that there is still a fierce battle tomorrow. Yunting nodded indifferently, still hesitating whether or not he should ask Princess Ding. After all, not everyone had the chance to meet the master of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Looking at the gentle figure under the moonlight, Yunting turned and walked down the city tower. If he could survive tomorrow, he would beg Princess Ding to accept him into the Black Cloud Cavalry. The rebel army was clearly becoming impatient compared to the slow and leisurely pace of the past few days. They had already started attacking the city before the sun rose, and as the sky grew brighter, the attacks became more and more fierce. If it wasn't for the fact that Yonglin City couldn't fit so many people, Mo Jingli would definitely want to bring all of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers to besiege this small city. To defend the city, the 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry were definitely not much more useful than the 2,000 border city guards. By noon, the remaining soldiers in Yonglin City were already exhausted. The city gate was also on the verge of collapsing under the constant attacks of the rebel army. Wang, young Master Su, we can't hold on any longer. You guys should leave first. Xiaoshu dragged his body covered in blood and stood in front of Yili, and the brothers of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Defending the city is our job. It's all thanks to you guys that we were able to defend for so many days. Yili raised his eyebrows. Where can we go now? There are hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city. Black Cloud Cavalry's 2,000 men didn't suffer any casualties, they are just trapped in the city. As long as we leave the city, we will definitely be able to kill our way out. Xiaoshu said. Yili pointed at the people behind him and said, ask them if they want to leave or not. Behind Yili was the stern-looking Black Cloud Cavalry commander Qin Feng and an heir and an san. Qin Feng said solemnly, the Black Cloud Cavalry exists to protect the Dechu state. If we leave behind the city and the soldiers guarding the city, we brothers can only apologize in front of the Black Cloud Cavalry soldiers when we return. And San looked at Xiaoshu with a smile and said, we are the Shadow Guard. Wherever the master is, we will be there. Xiaoshu stared at the person in front of him and felt his eyes were dry and stinging. He gritted his teeth and said, it's not worth it. Let Yonglin City bury a Princess Ding and 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. Such a price. And San patted Xiaoshu's shoulder and said with a smile, if Yonglin City is really breached, we will risk our lives to protect you and kill our way out. At that time we will be able to break out of the encirclement. What was the meaning of abandoning the city and fleeing now? Wouldn't it be better to abandon the city a few days earlier and save so many people from dying? Xiaoshu was stunned. He slapped Insan's hand away and turned to leave. Do whatever you want. Insan shrugged and said helplessly to the people behind him, he seems to be shy? An heir patted his third brother helplessly. Was he crazy? They were on the battlefield right now, okay? Seeing the city gate begin to break under the heavy impact, Yili sighed helplessly. In the end they couldn't hold on until the reinforcements arrived. Black Cloud Cavalry, get ready. Yes. The city gate tower was handed over to the few remaining defenders. Below the city gate tower, 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry were ready. They were like an arrow ready to shoot at any time. Yili turned back and nodded to Xiaoshu and Yunting who were standing on the city gate tower. With a wave of her hand, the city gate fell to the ground. The moment the rebel army outside the city had no time to rush in, the Black Cavalry rushed out like a gust of wind. Everywhere they went, blood soared. Prince, they are here. Black Cloud Cavalry. At the back of the army, Mo Jingli sat high on his horse and stared at the situation on the battlefield. He didn't need the people beside him to remind him. He naturally saw the group of strong black figures. As expected of the Black Cloud Cavalry, the general beside him couldn't help but sigh. If they had this kind of army, why would they worry about the world being unstable? Even if they were already enemies, they still couldn't hide their admiration when they saw this kind of elite army. Mo Jingli laughed coldly. They finally came out. With a wave of his hand, two groups of fresh troops that hadn't participated in the battle charged into the battlefield. They all say that the Black Cloud Cavalry is good at attacking. Let's see what you can do with so many people. Yonglin City wasn't big to begin with. Because of the addition of these two groups of people, it could be said that it was overcrowded. The war horses couldn't move at all. The Black Cloud Cavalry clearly understood this. They quickly gave up on their war horses and merged into the chaotic army. Using 2,000 people to stop tens of thousands of people was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the city gate was only so small. Even if they wanted tens of thousands of people, they couldn't rush in at the same time. Thus, for a moment, the two armies were still tangled in a stalemate at the city gate. Even if there were a few rebel soldiers who occasionally rushed in, they were quickly wiped out by the defending army inside the city gate. Who is that person? Mo Jingli, who was watching the battle, suddenly pointed at an exceptionally petite black-clothed figure in the chaotic army. He wore the same black cloud-patterned clothes as all of the Black Cloud Cavalry, but his movements were completely different from the Black Cloud Cavalry. If the Black Cloud Cavalry's movements were swift and fierce, then his movements were extremely simple and fierce. It was impossible to see any techniques, but with every simple movement, a soldier would fall in front of him. Regardless of whether it was the normal soldiers or the generals, there was no difference under his hands. That is, everyone was speechless. No one knew who that person was. It was because apart from his figure being a bit shorter and his movements being a bit more swift and fierce, he didn't seem any different from the other Black Cloud Cavalry. Emo Jingli's dark eyes gradually narrowed as he stared at the fierce figure amidst the chaotic army. That figure gave him a strange sense of familiarity. After a long time he finally spat out a name through gritted teeth, Yi Li. The military advisor on the side was stunned. He quickly looked at the person in the chaotic army and said in shock, "The prince said that is Princess Ding?" Emo Jingli ignored his question. The whip in his hand pointed forward. "If you capture that person alive, I will reward you with 1,000 taels of gold." Yes. Even though the Black Cloud cavalry had stopped the rebel army at the city gate, they were unable to effectively defend the city towers. Many rebel soldiers had already climbed up the city walls and started to fight with the defending army on the city walls. Yi Li could clearly feel the pressure at the foot of the city walls. She swept aside a rebel soldier that had pounced at her, and when she turned around she just happened to pierce the throat of another rebel soldier that had pounced at her from behind. An heir and San came over. An heir said in a low voice, "Young master, it's time to retreat." And San swung her sword and created a trail of blood as she said, "Did Emo Jingli discover the princess? Why do I feel that the people coming over right now aren't normal soldiers?" The people around them clearly had good martial arts and were harder to deal with than normal soldiers. Yi Li was helpless, but Yonglin City's fall was a foregone conclusion. If the Black Cloud cavalry sacrificed themselves now, there was no meaning. They had stalled at the city gate for almost 2 hours. Shattered Snow Pass must have received the news. Black Cloud cavalry retreat from the battlefield. Chapter 219. Yes. Team 1, 2 and 3 bring up the rear. Everyone else retreat. Qin Feng ordered loudly. "You want to run?" Emo Jingli could clearly see the situation on the battlefield from far away. The Black Cloud cavalry were good at ambushing, good at hiding and also good at escaping. The terrain around Yonglin was complicated. Once they left the battlefield it would be impossible to catch them. However, the Black Cloud cavalry didn't actually charge into the center of the rebel army. They only blocked the city gates and didn't allow them to advance. When they received the order they immediately retreated to the left, right and center of the city. There were also divine archers left behind to bring up the rear. No matter how unwilling the rebel army was, they could only watch as they left the battlefield. Emo Jingli gave a cold snort. He turned around and pulled out the bow on his horse. Knocking an arrow, he aimed at the petite black figure in the midst of the rebel army. In the midst of the slaughter, Yi Li could clearly sense a dangerous aura. He only felt that when he turned around he only saw Emo Jingli's malicious eyes and an arrow flying through the air. If it was any other time, Yi Li naturally wouldn't have to worry about not being able to dodge this arrow. However, he was currently being held down by several rebel soldiers and had no way of dodging. And San cried out in alarm and immediately pounced over. Yi Li cursed in his heart. He grabbed a rebel soldier's sword and threw it in the direction San was pouncing over. With this turn and throw he felt a burning pain in his left arm. The arrow behind him was almost within reach. "Young master." So. A white arrow emitting a beautiful golden light tore through the air. Emo Jingli's arrow collided with an arrow 3 feet in front of Yi Li and fell to the ground. However, that arrow didn't seem to be affected at all. It passed through a rebel soldier's body and entered another person's chest. That person's eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at the arrow that had entered his chest. It was as if he couldn't understand how an arrow could shoot out from his comrade's back and even pierce through his chest. Yi Li was also stunned by this shocking arrow, but she instantly threw it to the back of her mind. She turned around and kicked a rebel soldier who seemed to have launched a sneak attack. Heavens! An heir and San couldn't help but sigh in relief. Just now, San had pounced over but was blocked by the person that Yi Li had thrown over. She almost thought that the arrow was going to hit Wang Fei. At this moment his heart trembled and he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly moved closer to Yi Li. "Golden feather arrow. It's Prince." The Black Cloud cavalryman who stayed behind to cover the rear saw the golden arrowhead tail sticking out from the body of the fallen man and could not help but cry out in alarm. After clearing out the rebel army that had just entered the city with the Black Cloud cavalry, she stood on the city gate tower and looked down at the scene below. Everyone's gaze couldn't help but gather on the white-clothed man. White-clothed silver spear, moving like a dragon. Wherever he went the rebel army would retreat. They didn't dare to cross swords with him. Yi Li had heard Su Qingshan's evaluation before. When Emo Shuyao was young, he was as dazzling as fire. After the Great Change, the young Emo Shuyao was as calm as water, but contained a shocking undercurrent. And the current Emo Shuyao was like a peerless sword that had gone through thousands of trials and tribulations. The sharpness was restrained and the murderous aura gradually calmed down. However, the magnificence that had gone through countless trials and tribulations still attracted everyone's attention. Prince Ding? Yun Ting leaned weakly against the wall. He didn't care about the blood on his face. He looked at the figures moving around the city with a yearning expression. Xia Shu stood beside him. His face was completely relaxed. It is very clear that it is. So we waited for the reinforcements? We defended Yonglin City? Yun Ting's voice carried a bit of an illusory feeling. For a moment, it was hard to tell if it was a dream or reality. And San giggled. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. Congratulations, Officer Yun. You will be promoted later. Yun Ting ignored him. He blinked his eyes and looked at Yili. Unfortunately, Yili was staring at the city and didn't have time to pay attention to him. This time the battle didn't last for too long. In less than an hour, the rebel army began to retreat to the east. Looking at the rebel army that retreated like a tide, Yun Ting was speechless. What is the meaning of this? Were these rebel army purposely picking on soft persimmons? He didn't see that many people ran away without confronting the Black Cloud cavalry. Then what was the meaning of fighting to the death with them these past few days? And San smiled. Visayan, don't be sad. Don't talk about the reinforcements. Even if our prince stood there alone, those guys wouldn't dare to take a step forward. This is called imposing manner. Others can't learn it. Just Prince Ding standing at the gate of Yonglin City unharmed was enough to make most people scared out of their wits. What was the point of fighting? When can I have this kind of imposing manner? Yun Ting murmured. Chapter 220. Take your time. If you were able to kill 20 generals and defeat 300,000 enemies when you were 15 or 16 years old, you should have this kind of momentum now. And San comforted her without any sincerity. Yili was too lazy to listen to their nonsense. She turned around and prepared to go down the gate tower, but she was pulled back by Murong Ting, who had come back at some point. Yili frowned. Murong, why did you come back? Murong Ting snorted and looked down at the gate with a smile. Prince Ding came with reinforcements. I would be a fool if I didn't come back. It was you who kidnapped me. I didn't leave at all. Yili waved her hand indifferently. We'll talk about this later. I'm going down first. Murong Ting hurriedly pulled her back. She ran down while saying, Are you a woman or not? That's Prince Ding down there. Prince Ding. Moreover, he's your husband. Can't you change your clothes before going to greet him? Look at what you're wearing now. If Tianxiang and Jing'er were here, they would miss you to death. Yili couldn't help but have black lines on her face. Murong Ting's character was so straightforward. She was still a girl. At this time she actually had the time to think about these problems. Murong, this is the battlefield. What's wrong with the battlefield? Isn't the war over? Prince Ding is here. Even if the rebel army comes back, we won't die without you. Come with me. After saying that, he ignored Yili's stiff and helpless expression and dragged her to a place not far away from the city gate tower. Murong Ting's hands and feet were nimble. She was really suitable to be a battlefield medic. Yili looked at the neatly arranged clothes and accessories in front of her and couldn't help but praise in her heart. In less than half an hour she had to run back from the road to Shattered Snow Pass. She also had to find these clothes and accessories that were not easy to find in Yonglin City. Then she had to go up the gate tower to intercept her before the battle ended. She was really well trained. Hurry up, hurry up. After dressing up we can go and greet Prince Ding. Murong Ting grabbed the clothes on the table and stuffed them into Yili's hands. She pushed her into the inner room to change clothes. She fiddled with the accessories on the table. Yonglin City was small to begin with and it was not easy to find good things. What's more, it looked like they were going to die today, so no one opened their doors to do business. She had to go to many places to find these things. Yili helplessly went in with the clothes. If she didn't move, she was afraid that Murong Ting would rush in and tear her clothes to change her. The battlefield outside the city had already quieted down. Some people were left to clean up the battlefield, and Feng Jiao was ordered to lead the Mahist army into the city to take over the defense. Emo Shuyao urged his horse into the city. At the city gate, the remaining officers and soldiers of Yonglin City lined the streets to welcome him. Emo Shuyao looked around, but he didn't see the figure he wanted to see. Feng Jiao rode beside Emo Shuyao and asked curiously in a low voice, "Where did Wang Fei go?" Just now when he was outside he had clearly seen how Ding Wang Fei's hand rose and fell in the midst of the chaos. Her method of taking lives was simply too compatible with Emo Shuyao. At the same time, Feng Jiao reminded himself in his heart in the future he could provoke anyone but Wang Fei. It was too terrifying for a woman to become like this. I know where Wang Fei went. Feng Jiao pointed at the intersection in front of them. Emo Shuyao looked in the direction he pointed. Two figures, one tall and one short, appeared on the side of the street. The tall young woman dressed in red was excitedly dragging a woman dressed in blue over. Emo Shuyao's gaze was tightly locked onto the delicate and elegant woman. The woman who had been dressed in black on the battlefield, valiant and cold in her killing intent, had a faint helpless smile on her face. Her clothes were light, her wide sleeves fluttering. Her soft black hair was loosely tied up, and there was a pearl tassel hairpin in her hair. Her movements were gentle like the most elegant young woman in her boudoir. Yili clearly also saw Emo Shuyao. She paused slightly and stopped in her steps. Emo Shuyao urged his horse forward. The snow-white steed happily ran in front of Yili under its master's urging, and affectionately rubbed its head against her. Li. Emo Shuyao gave a faint smile. He bent over and reached out a hand to Yili. Yili raised her hand to grasp his outstretched hand. With a shake, Yili was pulled onto the back of the horse to sit in front of Emo Shuyao. Then the snow-white steed galloped away in front of Mu Rongting's shocked eyes. It left behind the young woman dressed in red with a dazed expression. A while later she muttered in a low voice, "Burning the bridge after crossing the river. This girl didn't even touch a battle horse, so petty." Feng Jiao, who was on horseback in the distance, looked at the dazed soldiers and the curious black cloud cavalry. He shrugged and got off his horse. "All right, aren't subordinates supposed to take care of things that must be taken care of when their master is not free?" The two rode through Yonglin City and galloped out of the city. The steed was worthy of being called a steed. In the blink of an eye, even shattered snow pass was in sight. Yili lowered her head to look at her waist that was hurting a bit. She said in a low voice, "Emo Shuyao, where are we going?" Emo Shuyao lowered his head to look at her. He finally pulled on the reins and got off the horse. Yili raised her brows and prepared to get off the horse as well. But when she lowered her head, what welcomed her was Emo Shuyao's open arms. "Come down." Seeing his insistence, Yili could only let him carry her off the horse. Nestled in the slightly cold embrace, Yili did not know why, but she only felt a sense of relief and relaxation. The indescribable heat that came from her face made her feel a bit helpless. Raising her head, the elegant and pleasant scent of a man greeted her. Yili opened her eyes wide in shock. The man's kiss was like a sudden storm, sweeping over Yili while she was still in a daze. Her petite body was tightly locked in his embrace. His slightly cold fingertips gently lifted her helpless face. His warm and moist lips lingered on her bright red, soft and beautiful lips. Emo Shuyao's kiss was not gentle, it was even a bit rough. With a bit of tyranny and an indescribable anger, he pried open Yili's lips, forcing her to open her mouth and enter. Her helpless fragrant tongue danced with him. Yili frowned slightly and wanted to struggle. The arm that clamped down on her waist used even more strength and stubbornly imprisoned her in his embrace. One of his hands gently rubbed the hair behind her head, forcing her to deeply entangle with him and exchange their breaths. Yili weakly tugged at the front of his clothes. Shuyao. When they separated, the two of them were slightly panting. Emo Shuyao lowered his head and leaned his forehead against Yili's smooth forehead. He said in a low voice, "Lili, you scared me." When he rushed to Yonglin City and saw that scene, no one could understand the shock and fear in his heart. Even he himself did not know what he was thinking at that moment. He just subconsciously shot that arrow. When he saw that arrow shoot through two people in succession, bringing out a beautiful flower of blood, the tyrannical feeling in his heart did not subside at all. If it was not for his amazing self-control, the second arrow would have been shot at Emo Shuyao. If he could not block that arrow, none of the rebel soldiers present today would be able to live. Yili's face was bright red. For the first time in her life, She was so embarrassed that she did not know where to put her hands and feet. She actually kissed a man on the side of the road where there might be people coming and going, but when she heard Emo Xiaoyao's sigh, all of her struggles and rejection turned into nothingness. Chapter 221. Emo Xiaoyao, it's so good to see you again. Yili sighed softly. Emo Xiaoyao lowered his head, his deep eyes full of gentleness and warmth. His slightly warm thin lips once again touched her delicate red lips, this time extremely gentle and lingering. I miss you very much. I really shouldn't have let you come to the southern border alone. Yili smiled faintly and didn't say anything. She didn't intend to tell him that after being separated for so long, she also missed him a little. Well, not a little. The well-behaved white horse had already run off somewhere. The place where the two of them were now was only a few miles away from Shattered Snow Pass. The majestic pass was clearly visible. However, Emo Xiaoyao didn't intend to immediately return to Yonglin City or see Murongshen. Instead, he pulled Yili to a nearby hillside to sit down and rest. Yili leaned against Emo Xiaoyao and sat down. After relaxing her tense body for several days, she couldn't help but sigh comfortably. When she raised her head, she saw Emo Xiaoyao's slightly frowning expression. What's wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable or injured? Emo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, I've been on the road for several days, I'm a little tired. Speaking of injuries, Emo Xiaoyao pulled up her left arm and pulled up her wide sleeve, revealing the slender wound on her arm. He frowned and said, Why didn't you bandage it? Yili didn't expect Emo Xiaoyao to see her injury. She shook her head and smiled. It's just a scratch, it's not bleeding anymore. It'll heal faster this way. Nonsense. Emo Xiaoyao scolded in a low voice. He took out several small medicine bottles that he carried with him and used the transparent liquid in one of the bottles to clean her wound. Only then did he carefully sprinkle the medicine powder. Then he took out a white handkerchief from his bosom and bandaged the wound. Yili admired Emo Xiaoyao's perfectly bandaged arm and smiled. It's really fine. I'll be fine in 2 days. Emo Xiaoyao raised his hand and pulled her into his embrace. He stroked her soft hair and said in a low voice, You're not allowed to get injured in the future. Otherwise you won't be allowed to go anywhere. Yili didn't say anything. Accidents happened all the time. She couldn't guarantee anything. I'll try my best. Didn't you suffer a lot on the battlefield? Emo Xiaoyao's reputation as a young war god wasn't for nothing. He wasn't a god that had descended from the heavens and was invulnerable to all weapons. Can I be the same as you? Yili looked up and squinted at him unhappily. Are you discriminating against women? Emo Xiaoyao said helplessly, I don't discriminate against women. Even if I did, I wouldn't discriminate against you. His Lily had left like this. If she was discriminated against, all the men in the world would commit suicide. Then you're saying that I'm not like a woman? Lily, Emo Xiaoyao looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. Are you angry or acting cute? Yili was stunned. She stared blankly at Emo Xiaoyao's gentle smile. She wanted to pounce on him and bite him or beat herself up. She was actually being unreasonable with Emo Xiaoyao. She was even more childish than Murong. Murong definitely wouldn't ask such a childish and senseless question. Emo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. Before she could fly into a rage, he pulled her into his embrace. Sit with me for a bit. I'm a bit tired. Yili moved slightly, but she quickly calmed down. Emo Xiaoyao's body wasn't very good. It was impossible for him to make a miraculous recovery in such a short period of time. Even if he tried to hide it, she didn't miss the tiredness and paleness between his brows. Leaning tightly into his embrace, Yili didn't know what she was thinking as she gradually fell asleep. On the side of the official road not far away from the Shattered Snow Pass, a few dark guards were quietly hiding their tracks, protecting their respective masters in the dark. And San lazily hung himself on a large tree with dense foliage on the side of the road. He pointed to a small hill not far away and said to an heir who was resting with his eyes closed under the tree, Look at how long they're staying. If they hide there, they'll definitely be discovered by the prince and Wang Fei. An heir raised his head to look at him. They're shadow guards, not tracking and surveillance. It's fine as long as they're not discovered. Even if the prince doesn't discover them, he'll know that they're following behind. Shadow guards were supposed to protect their master's safety 24 hours a day. And San rolled around in the tree. We're also shadow guards. although they didn't look like it. And Air's expression wasn't good. We're not qualified shadow guards. When we go back this time, the prince will most likely give Wang Fei a few more shadow guards. And San's expression was also a bit gloomy. If Wang Fei didn't stop him on the battlefield just now, he wouldn't have been injured. And San didn't feel anything wrong with being an arrow for Wang Fei. Ding Wang Fu trained them to be able to block swords and arrows when necessary, blocking all the dangers of their masters. And when Wang Fei went to stop him from blocking the arrow, she was cut. If it wasn't for the prince's arrow, he didn't know if Wang Fei was still alive or dead. As shadow guards, they really weren't qualified. And C and an E were still nowhere to be seen, although this was Wang Fei's order. He and an heir didn't play the role of shadow guards at all. I'll ask for forgiveness from the prince. I definitely won't drag you down. An heir glanced at him. What idiotic words are you saying? For a team. If you were replaced, would we still stay? Besides, you're not the only one at fault. I prefer to follow Wang Fei. Me too. He glanced at the shadow guards on the other side. Before they followed Wang Fei, the life of the shadow guards was too boring. Although they hadn't followed other masters before, just training and listening to the seniors' teachings was very boring. If they didn't follow Wang Fei, they would definitely become as boring as those shadow guards. If we go and ask for forgiveness now, do you think the prince will be lenient? If you go now, you'll only be more unlucky. An heir said lightly. As a shadow guard with professional ethics, he would never let anyone know that he saw the prince and Wang Fei doing that on the roadside. Of course, that included the prince himself. But the prince and Wang Fei have already stayed here for a long time. If they stay here any longer, General Murong will come out to find them. And San said, tangled. Then let them go invite the prince and Wang Fei. An heir raised his chin and looked at the shadow guard following Mo Shuyao not far away. He believed that they were also tangled. As prince's personal shadow guard, their ability to hide was too bad. He and Ansan found where they were hiding with a few glances. Prince Wang Fei. An heir stood up from behind the tree and saluted the two people who came together. Ansan in the tree silently landed and also saluted. Mo Shuyao narrowed his eyes and looked at them. He said lightly, your skills aren't bad. The two people couldn't help trembling in their hearts. Was the prince praising them? Yili said with a faint smile, get up, what are you doing here? The two had bitter faces and didn't dare speak. Wang Fei didn't need them to always be by her side, but if they really went to do their own things now, the prince would definitely fly into a rage. Wang Fei could order them, but the prince could replace them. Mo Shuyao asked with a frown, where did the other two people go? I remember that you should have 4 people with you. Chapter 222. Yili smiled and said, I let them do their work. If there aren't enough people, you can transfer them from other places. The shadow guard is used to protect your safety. Mo Shuyao disagreed and said, since these 4 people can't protect you, how about we send a few more when we go back? Or give you the people by my side. Yili glanced at Ansan, who quietly gave her a pleading look and helplessly said, I don't like people following me in the dark. They are there to protect your safety. I will let people choose the people with the best concealment ability so that you won't feel troubled. No one can be better than us. Ansan secretly glanced at Mo Shuyao and muttered in a low voice. Mo Shuyao's indifferent gaze immediately fell on him and Ansan's body couldn't help but stiffen. Mo Shuyao lightly said, there has never been a shadow guard that needed master to save. Just based on this point, no one is better than you. Mo Shuyao. Yili reached out her hand to hold Mo Shuyao's hand and said softly, they have all helped me a lot. You can see that I don't need a shadow guard. I need assistance that I can trust. Moreover, the shadow guard isn't useful everywhere, right? For example, there were some places where the shadow guard couldn't follow, and the places where the shadow guard could follow were usually places where ordinary guards could appear. Moreover, the degree of danger wouldn't be high. Fortunately, there were only a few shadow guards in the Ding Palace who were specially trained to protect their master. The rest had other duties, otherwise it would be a waste of talent. Mo Shuyao glanced at the 2 shadow guards who had their heads lowered and his eyes slightly narrowed. He lowered his head to look at Yili, who was looking at him seriously, and said in a low voice, they can continue to stay by your side. I will transfer another 4 shadow guards to you. Don't. Yili smiled faintly and said, I'm not used to the shadow guard. Even if you send someone else to follow me, it won't be long before they become the same as an heir and the others. What's the point? Emo Shuyao lightly snorted and turned to walk on the official road. Yili pursed her lips and smiled, following behind him. An heir and Ansan were left with a blank face. Ah, heir, what does Prince mean by this? It means that we can continue to follow Princess. Probably. Broken Snow Pass camp. Seeing Yili and Emo Shuyao come in, everyone in the tent quickly stood up. Murongshin personally stepped down from the position of commander-in-chief and came forward to greet them. Greetings to Prince and Princess. You is you. You please accept this general's bow. As he spoke, he took off his battle robe and was about to bow down. Emo Shuyao reached out and grabbed his shoulder, saying coolly, I am doing my duty. General Murong doesn't need to be so courteous. However, now that Prince Ding's body had suddenly recovered, it aroused the Emperor's suspicion. No matter what, the Emperor would not be willing to hand over such a miraculous achievement like pacifying the southern border to Prince Ding. Emo Shuyao smiled indifferently. It seems that this is indeed a bad opportunity. I'll have to trouble you these days. I will stay in Yonglin for a few days. When the reinforcements arrive, I will leave for the capital. Murongshin was startled. Prince won't stay in Shattered Snow Pass? Emo Shuyao smiled. Shattered Snow Pass is guarded by you. I don't need to tell you what to do. And Emo Jingli's more than 100,000 troops are in Yonglin. I still have some personal matters to deal with. Murongshin could only nod. In that case, Prince, do as you wish. Although it was a pity that he couldn't teach Nanzhao a heavy lesson this time, this kind of thing wasn't something he, a general, could decide. Besides, Prince Ding appeared in Shattered Snow Pass in good health. Just this news was enough to scare the Nani out of their wits. After all, the last war in which Nanjiang was almost wiped out was only 10 years ago. When they returned to Yonglin City, it was already night time. Fortunately, Emo Shuyao didn't need to spend too much effort on Yonglin City. Feng Jiao, who was left behind, had already taken care of everything. Yili looked curiously at Feng Jiao, who had changed out of his gorgeous red clothes and into a green armor and white robe. He looked like a different person in the capital. At the same time, Feng Jiao also looked curiously at Yili, who was still gentle and calm. He really couldn't equate the elegant and beautiful woman in front of him with the ruthless black-clothed woman on the battlefield. Emo Shuyao pulled Yili to sit down in the study. He pointed to the chair next to Feng Jiao and asked, Leng Haoyu hasn't arrived yet? Feng Jiao smiled. He just arrived. He went to change his clothes and come over. He encountered some trouble on the way and was chased all the way. He was a bit embarrassed when he rushed over. Chapter 223. Yili curiously raised her eyebrows as she looked at Feng Jiao. Feng Jiao smiled. He's relying on his wealth to snatch grain from Prince Li. Isn't he just waiting for people to chop him up? However, the results aren't bad. He's bought at least 30% of Jiangnan's grain this year. Now that Prince Li has turned around to attack Jiangnan, I'm afraid he'll run out of grain soon. That's why Prince Li has sent assassins to chase him down. How is he going to deal with that much grain? Jiangnan could be said to be Dechu State's granary. 30% of Jiangnan's grain wasn't a small amount. Feng Jiao smiled carelessly. Once Jiangnan is in chaos, the price of grain will only skyrocket. It's not like we can't sell it. Even if we can't sell it, we still have hundreds of thousands of people to feed. Sure enough, Leng Haoyu appeared at the door not long after. There was still a scar on his handsome face. Fortunately, it didn't look too serious and wouldn't leave a scar. Your Highness, Princess Consort. Emo Shuyao nodded and said in a low voice, You've been here for more than half a year. What's going on in Lingzhou this time? Why did Emo Jingli suddenly decide to mobilize? Leng Haoyu looked at Emo Shuyao in surprise. Didn't Prince bring people south because he knew of Prince Li's rebellion? Emo Shuyao said lightly, I came here for some matters in Nanjiang. I received news of Emo Jingli's mobilization as soon as I set out. No matter how brainless Emo Jingli is, he should know that he's not completely prepared. Feng Jiao shook his head. I feel that Emo Jingli chose a good time. It just so happened that we were caught off guard. Not to mention that we came a few days later. Even if we came half a day later, Shattered Snow Pass might not be able to hold on. Emo Shuyao frowned and said, if he is really ready, he shouldn't be in such a hurry to congratulate Shattered Snow Pass. He could have divided his troops into two groups. One group would delay General Murong at Shattered Snow Pass, and the other group would march to the east. The southeast region has always been peaceful and there are rarely any garrisons. As long as he completely occupies the south of the Cloudwater River, not to mention the tens of thousands of men we have now, even if we have 200,000 to 300,000 men, it will not be easy for us to pass through the Cloudwater River and quell the chaos. General Murong couldn't do it alone. It was only a matter of time before Shattered Snow Pass fell. When the time comes, whatever benefits Emo Jingli obtains he won't need to share with Nanzhao. He's in a hurry to mobilize his troops before he's ready. Does that mean the emperor wants to make a move on him? Leng Hao, you guessed. Feng Jiao shook his head and said, that's not right. If the emperor wanted to do something to him he wouldn't have let him leave the capital. Leng Haoyu nodded, thought for a moment and said, King Li's cavalry was indeed sudden. He didn't do anything when he first returned to Ling province, but 3 days later he suddenly mobilized his troops. At that time I was also shocked. Yili asked, why did the prince suddenly rush over? Emo Shuyao glanced at her, took out a letter from his bosom and handed it over. Yili took a look at it. It was the letter she sent back before, and there was also a letter that was obviously her grandfather's notes. Looking down, Yili said in surprise, the Saintess of Nanjiang Shu Manlin is a descendant of the previous emperor? This was indeed what Yili didn't expect when she sent it. This was too melodramatic. She did guess whether Shu Manlin had other identities, but the Saintess of Nanjiang was a descendant of the previous emperor, and Emo Jingli was the current emperor's younger brother. Then the two of them conspired to rebel? Didn't Nanzhao betray the previous dynasty to establish the country? How could the descendant of the previous emperor call her the Saintess of Nanjiang? Looking at the king of Nanzhao's attitude towards Shu Manlin, it shouldn't be that he didn't know her identity. Emo Xiaoyao said, the ornament you sent back was a relic of the Chaoyang princess who married into a tribe in Nanjiang during the previous dynasty. Yili raised her eyebrows. So what? The Chaoyang princess had been Nanzhao for hundreds of years. Feng Jiao explained, this Chaoyang princess was a strange woman. It is said that before she was married she had participated in court politics. But at that time the emperor didn't like women to participate in politics, and he reprimanded her several times. Later he sent her to Nanjiang for a political marriage. Although the Chaoyang princess disappeared, the tribe she married into became the largest tribe in Nanjiang at that time because of the support of the previous emperor. At the same time, it was the predecessor of the Nanzhao royal family. The Nanzhao royal family admired the culture of the Central Plains. Although their relationship with the previous dynasty was not good, they were very good to some rebellious ministers of the previous dynasty. From the establishment of Nanzhao until the fall of the previous dynasty, there were at least 3 princes, 2 princesses and 1 Wangye that could be traced. Some of these people failed in their rebellion and some fled to Nanzhao because they were framed. Without exception, these people all married or married a direct descendant of the Nanzhao royal family. The last one they took in, although the records are vague, we speculate that it should be the crown prince of the previous dynasty. So what you are saying is that the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang may be the orphan of the previous crown prince? Yili asked, feeling a wave of dizziness. As expected, if you thought the story was melodramatic, the reality was even more melodramatic. Feng Jiao said with a smile, in the 3rd year of the previous dynasty's fall, the Queen of Nanzhao married a man of unknown identity from the Central Plains. 5 years later, Nanzhao continued to invade the borders of Dechu state. It wasn't until the Queen of Nanzhao and her husband died that it gradually calmed down. But in all these years the 2 countries have been at war and have never truly stopped. As long as there is a chance, Nanzhao will think of ways to invade the Central Plains. Yili rubbed her forehead. I understand. So Nanzhao has a very strong bloodline of the previous dynasty's royal family. They plan on taking back the country for the previous dynasty and entering the Central Plains? Taking back the country for the previous dynasty may be fake, but they definitely want to enter the Central Plains, Feng Jiao said with a nod. Yili looked strangely at Emo Xiaoyao and said, even so, you don't need to rush over so quickly. Since they have prepared for more than 100 years, they shouldn't mind preparing for a few more decades. Emo Xiaoyao looked at her. If Emo Jingli did not raise troops this time, what did you plan on doing? Yili stilled and remembered that she had planned on going to the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang to take a look. There is danger? Emo Shuyao's expression was not very good. He said, don't you think that the so-called Holy Maiden of Nanjiang is very problematic? Yili blinked, waiting for his answer. The Holy Maiden of Nanjiang must enter the Holy Maiden when she is 25 years old. But in reality, most of the Holy Maidens are 21 or 22 years old. The youngest one is even 19 years old and has already stepped down from the position of Holy Maiden and entered the Holy Maiden. No one knows what these so-called Holy Maidens look like, no one knows their family background, and no one knows what they do after entering the Holy Maiden. But these women must receive all kinds of education from a young age. After becoming a Holy Maiden, they even have a certain influence on Nanzhao's political affairs. How much time, money, and energy does it take to teach such a person? Is it just to put her there as a Holy Maiden for a few years and then throw her into some Holy Maiden to die of old age? Emo Shuyao said indifferently. Leng Haoyu thought, the prince's words are reasonable. The rules of the Holy Maidens of Nanzhao are really strange. I remember that the Holy Maiden who held the position for the shortest time was only 2 years. She became a Holy Maiden at 15 and stepped down at 17. Chapter 224. I thought we were talking about the dangers of Nanjiang's Holy Land? Yili reminded him. Emo Shuyao said, there is no such thing as Nanjiang's Holy Land. Maybe there is such a place, but it is definitely not a place where Nanjiang's treasures are enshrined and the Holy Maiden is retired. That should be the biggest secret of Nanzhao's royal family. So once someone touches that place, the Nanzhao royal family will kill them at all costs. That is why there is a rumor that no one who trespasses into Nanjiang's Holy Land survived. Yili was a bit disappointed. That meant there was no such thing as the underworld flower in Nanjiang's so-called Holy Land. Leng Haoyu said, this shouldn't have anything to do with Prince Li's sudden attack, right? Feng Jiao lazily leaned back in his chair and smiled. It doesn't have anything to do with it? It has a lot to do with it. In the past we thought it was Mo Jingli who wanted to use Nanjiang's Holy Maiden and Nanzhao. Now it seems that the fool was used. That is why he attacked in such a hurry. Thought he was smart. A fool is a fool. Yili was a bit confused. What bargaining chip can Nanzhao use to persuade Mo Jingli? Feng Jiao smiled. For example, sharing the world with Nanjiang's Holy Maiden. With Nanzhao's help, it will be easier for Mo Jingli to obtain the world. When the time comes, there will be no conflict between the country and the beauty. Any man will take the bait. Yili couldn't understand. Nanzhao had worked hard for hundreds of years to enter the Central Plains. Was the world really the most intoxicating thing? If their plan is not bad. If they can't break through Shui Pass from the outside, they will break through from the inside. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for the princess, I'm afraid that today, not to mention Shui Pass, there would be no place for reinforcements in Ling Province and Yong Province. Leng Haoyu frowned and asked, what does Prince plan to do? Mo Shuyao said indifferently, I have no plans. It is not safe for you to stay in Jiangnan. Return to the capital as soon as possible. Leng Haoyu moved his lips to say something. Mo Shuyao glanced at him and said, I will tell General Murong to have you and Murong Ting get married as soon as possible. Haoyu. Leng Haoyu quivered and hurriedly said, this subordinate understands. Many thanks to Prince for fulfilling my wish. Feng Jiao said somewhat unwillingly, it's not easy for us to leave the capital, but we have to end things so hastily. Does the emperor have to be so guarded against us? What a waste of my time. Mo Shuyao said calmly, Nanzhao won't amount to anything, we don't need to worry about it for now. Don't worry, you won't come for nothing this time. Feng Jiao raised an eyebrow. Only you would dare to say that Nanzhao will not succeed. I think the Nanzhao people are not simple. They can spend such a long time to patiently set things up. Mo Shuyao's smile was cold. More than 100 years. Generation after generation, if they can't succeed, what can they accomplish? Probably the only thing worth praising is their persistence. Feng Jiao said with a smile, I guess the people of Nanzhao hate the Ding royal household the most. For more than 100 years to not succeed, the Ding royal household's contribution could not go unnoticed. For example, 10 years ago, if it weren't for the last-minute withdrawal of troops, the Nanzhao people would never have to worry about the problem of how to enter the Central Plains. Then what does Prince mean when you say you won't let me come for nothing? Are we still going to fight Nanzhao? Mo Shuyao raised his eyes and smiled, we're not going to fight. We're going to suppress bandits. Suppress bandits? The three people in the study asked in unison. Feng Jiao's eyes turned and he asked, I don't remember Yongzhou having any powerful bandits. Mo Xiuyao said calmly, there weren't any in the past, but that doesn't mean there aren't any now. Otherwise, what's with the reinforcements from Yongzhou? Wasn't it Mo Jingli who sent people to do it? Feng Jiao asked. Mo Xiuyao smiled coldly, not to mention whether he has the brains or not. Even if he does, how many people does the Lingzhou rebel army need to wipe out 20,000 people? At the time, Mo Jingli's rebel army was still near Yongzhou. How could he have an army of at least 30,000 people attack the reinforcements from Yongzhou hundreds of li away? Feng Jiao thought for a moment and said, at the very least he had to have sent out this army on the same day that he mobilized to be able to make it in time to ambush the reinforcements from Yongzhou by Yunlan River. Also, he had to know beforehand that Yongzhou would send reinforcements to Shattered Snow Pass. There are very few people who know that Wu Qingliang is one of us. At least Mo Jingli wouldn't know. If he didn't know, then he wouldn't have sent troops to ambush the reinforcements from Yongzhou. That's because Yongzhou might have done the same thing as the other places and might have sent reinforcements to Shattered Snow Pass. The ones who ambushed official Wu weren't Mo Jingli's people? Yili raised her eyebrows. Nanjiang isn't the only one eyeing the Dechu state, Mo Xiuyao said lightly. Xiling, Leng Haoyu said with certainty. The northern tribes were too far from Nanjiang and the northern tribes' people looked very different from the Dechu state. It was impossible to infiltrate the Dechu state on a large scale. But Xiling was different. Even though there were slight differences, that only referred to the Xiling royal family who married foreigners. Most of the ordinary Xiling citizens were not very different from the Dechu state people. Leng Haoyu couldn't help but shiver when he thought about how there was an army that could wipe out 20,000 people infiltrating the Dechu state. Mo Xiuyao's eyes were deep and serene. The generals guarding the Dechu state's borders should have been taught a lesson long ago. Feng Jiao shrugged. The generals guarding the borders had been replaced by the emperor in recent years. They had no choice. Suppressing bandits seemed like a good idea. Prince, when are we leaving? Feng Jiao asked excitedly. Since there was going to be a war, there was no need to care about whether it was Nanjiang or Xiling. Mo Xiuyao lowered his head to look at his slender fingers and said in a low voice, after the emperor's people come to take over Yonglin. Get someone to make the preparations first. Remember, if you let one person walk out of the Dechu state alive, don't ever tell me you want to go to the battlefield again. His prince. Feng Jiao stood up and replied loudly. He hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask, Shattered Snow Pass, don't worry about it for now. They won't be able to determine the victor in a few months. We don't have time to care about them. Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice. Understood. Yili quietly looked at the two men answering each other and frowned slightly. She was inexplicably angry and felt uneasy. Outside Yonglin City, King Li's camp, damn it. Why would Mo Xiuyao appear here now? In the tent, Mo Jingli's face was dark and twisted. It was close to June, but it made people feel the bone-chilling cold of the harsh winter. No one dared to speak. It wasn't just because of King Li's anger, but also because they were frightened by Prince Ding's sudden appearance on the battlefield. If there was anything more frightening than Prince Ding's appearance, it would be the appearance of Prince Ding in good health. When they saw the silver-white figure galloping through the air, almost everyone felt a sense of despair and regret in their hearts at the same time. When he was young, he was already known as the god of war. Was Prince Ding, who was known to be more intelligent than his ancestor, someone they could resist? There were even some people who were secretly hesitating and regretting. Was it really the right decision to follow King Li and start a rebellion? The achievement of ascending to the throne could lead to great wealth and power, but the price of failure was also terrifying. Chapter 225. The usually calm military advisor's face was also deathly pale. In their plan, no matter what, Mo Xiuyao would not appear in Yongzhou so quickly. No, it should be said that Mo Xiuyao would not appear in Yongzhou at all. But now, a crippled Prince Ding was indeed terrifying, but a healthy Prince Ding who could move freely was even more terrifying. Prince, has there been any news from the capital? Prince Ding. Mo Jingli snorted coldly. Mo Xiuyao left the capital long before we mobilized. Yili. It's actually her. When he thought about how the person who made the Black Cloud cavalry block his path was Yili, Mo Jingli wanted nothing more than to capture her and skin her alive. The military advisor said, previously, it was rumored that Princess Ding went missing. Now it seems that she should have gone to Nanzhao. Previously, Nanzhao sent news that young Master Qingchen was missing. I'm afraid that Princess Ding went to Nanzhao for young Master Qingchen. The more he spoke, the colder the military advisor's heart became. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, Murongshen, and young Master Qingchen, who was very likely to appear. The people in front of them almost made him see no hope of breaking through Yonglin. Prince, I feel that the plan now is to immediately give up on Yongzhou and lead the army east. Before the imperial court's reinforcements arrive, we should seize all the areas south of Yunlan River. Mo Jingli said in a low voice. Mo Xiuyao has already reached Yonglin. Do you think he will let us withdraw? The military advisor stroked his beard and said, with Prince's understanding of Prince Ding, with Prince Ding's temper, will he give up so easily today? Mo Jingli lowered his brows and thought for a moment. He shook his head and said, Mo Xiuyao was known as Fierce Wind when he was young. He has always been swift and decisive when it comes to war. Based on his temper in the past, he wouldn't give up until the other side suffered heavy casualties in today's battle. The military advisor smiled and nodded. If that's the case, why does Prince think that Prince Ding didn't follow up his victory today? Mo Jingli's eyes flashed and he raised his voice slightly. He doesn't have enough troops. Military advisor clapped his hands and laughed. That's right, Yonglin is limited by the terrain and the Black Cloud cavalry is coming in a hurry. We are unable to see how many soldiers they have. But Prince Ding should know about our military strength. The fact that he didn't press the advantage means that our forces are at least twice as strong as his. Mo Jingli nodded. That's right. How could my brother, the Emperor, allow him to mobilize more than 100,000 soldiers so easily? Not to mention, he wouldn't be able to get there so quickly if he had an army of over 100,000. If that's the case, why don't we? Absolutely not. The middle-aged man smiled faintly. That is me. Mo Jingli stared at him and said, Sir, he is Genin of Gojoseon's right-hand man. Why have you suddenly appeared here with I? He Wuyun smiled and said, on the orders of the prince and the crown prince, I am willing to ally with King Li. Ally? The military advisor did not understand. He Wuyun smiled and said, I heard that King Li is stirring up trouble in Jiangnan. My prince and the crown prince admire Prince's ambition. At the same time, Prince should know that Jinnan Palace and Xiling have a blood feud with the Ding Palace of Eastern Chu. Therefore His Highness ordered me to serve His Highness like a dog and horse. On the day that the prince succeeds, Genin of Gojoseon will personally come to Lingzhou to congratulate the prince on his coronation. Mo Jingli looked at him and asked, what do your prince and the crown prince want? He had long known that there was always a trade-off. He Wuyun smiled and said, Xiling does not need Prince to pay any price. There's only one thing. Prince Ding and the Mahist army. Prince Ding's legs have already recovered. I presume that the prince has already seen them today? Mo Xiuyao was ambitious when he was young. That year when he was only 14 or 15 he almost destroyed Nanzhao. Now that he has been dormant for several years, I'm afraid that he will be like a tiger out of its cage. No one in the world can stop him. My lord is worried about Xiling's safety. Therefore he wants to ally with Prince to stabilize the Ding Palace. Please reconsider, Prince. Mo Jingli was somewhat displeased. Although He Wuyuan said that he wanted to ally with him to fight against Mo Xiuyao, his words were full of praise for Mo Xiuyao. He said lightly, Mo Xiuyao has been idle at home for nearly 10 years. Moreover, he is young and it may not be good when he grows up. Teacher, you are exaggerating. He Wuyuan was not angry. He chuckled and said, it doesn't matter if I am exaggerating or not. The Ding Palace is famous throughout history, and Mo Xiuyao has never tasted defeat in his life. This is also the truth. Could it be that, teacher, he has a plan to deal with Mo Xiuyao? Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said mockingly. He Wuyuan smiled and said, although I cannot guarantee that I can defeat Prince Ding, I can help Prince Li stabilize his position in Jiangnan. Mo Jingli's eyes flashed slightly. He sized up He Wuyuan with a look of evaluation. He Wuyuan did not mind and smiled calmly. Prince, do not worry. Prince Ding definitely does not have much time to stay in Yongzhou. As long as he is transferred away, the court will not be able to stop Prince's momentum even if they send 1,000,000 troops, let alone 100,000. Feng Jiao smiled bitterly. Why didn't Wang Fei ask the prince directly? Yi Li sighed softly. If he didn't want to say it, how could I ask? Feng Jiao said, if His Royal Highness doesn't say anything, it may mean that His Royal Highness's body has indeed fully recovered. Yi Li looked at him and said with a smile, Young Master Feng, although I can't tell if he is lying or not, I can't tell if he is lying. But there was at least one thing I understood. A person whose legs have been crippled for 8 years and who has been poisoned, no matter what kind of medicine he uses, it is impossible for him to recover to such a state in such a short period of time. Even if Mr. Qin has found the antidote and healed Prince's legs, it wouldn't be possible for him to recover to such a state in such a short period of time. It's impossible for him to recover to this extent within half a year. If there was really such a miraculous medicine, why would Mo Xiao have to wait for so many years? Feng Jiao looked at her with difficulty. Yi Li did not back down and stared at him. A quarter of an hour later, Feng Jiao helplessly retreated. After thinking for a moment, he said, even if I don't say it, Wang Fei will know sooner or later. Prince used phoenix grass. Yi Li was shocked. He still remembered what Xinyang had said. The fire poison produced by using the phoenix grass would cause cold and fire to coexist in Mo Xiao's body. Even if he had the intense fire lotus, he would not be able to cure the cold poison in his body. Why didn't anyone stop him? Feng Jiao helplessly lowered his head and said, Prince made his decision, who could stop him? Yi Li's face darkened. Why did he have to? Before she could finish, Yi Li's voice suddenly stopped. She slumped back onto the stool. When Feng Jiao left the capital, the news of Mo Jingli's rebellion had not yet reached the capital. He was, because of her, Wang Fei. Feng Jiao saw Yi Li's ugly expression and understood the crux of the matter. With some difficulty he comforted, actually, even if it was 2 days later, Prince would still receive the news of Li Wang's rebellion. Prince doesn't have the time to wait for the intense fire lotus 2 years later. Yi Li nodded blankly and said, Has Mr. Qin come to Yongzhou? Feng Jiao nodded. Mr. Qin insisted on coming, but he can't travel long distances and will only arrive a few days later. Yi Li closed her eyes slightly and nodded, saying, I know. Many thanks, Master Feng. Feng Jiao frowned with some worry. Wang Fei? Yi Li waved her hand, saying, It's fine, Master Feng has some matters to attend to first. Feng Jiao looked at her and could only take his leave. Yi Li sat in the shade of the tree, lost in thought. If she hadn't come to Nanjiang. No, if she hadn't sent that secret letter back, Mo Xiao wouldn't have rushed to Nanjiang because of this. Perhaps it was as Feng Jiao said, they didn't have the time to wait for the intense fire lotus 2 years later. Perhaps in the end, Mo Xiao would still take the phoenix grass. But, now Mo Xiao still did it because of her. And San. Wang Fei. And San appeared behind her, looking worriedly at the weak figure of the woman under the tree. Where's Ensi now? And San said, Ensi just went to Xiling. Wang Fei previously ordered him to investigate Han Mingyue's matter in Xiling. He should have just entered Xiling's border now. Yi Li nodded, saying, Send someone to send him a message. Ignore Han Mingyue's matter for now. Think of a way to keep an eye on sickly scholar, if he wants to obtain the falling sky flower again. Snatch it at all cost. And San hesitated, saying, The falling sky flower is in Nanjiang. Why don't this subordinate take people to look for it? Yi Li shook her head, saying, Nanzhao isn't small, and none of us have seen what the falling sky flower looks like. The one surnamed Liang should be in the hands of Tianyi Pavilion right now. No. The one surnamed Liang should also be in Xiling right now. But he's not in sickly scholar's hands. Send someone to tell Han Mingxi what he promised to tell me should be fulfilled. Yes. And San nodded, nimbly disappearing behind her. After San left, Yi Li sat for a long time before getting up to return to the courtyard where she and Mo Xiao were temporarily staying. When she returned to the room, she didn't see Mo Xiao. Thinking about it, Yi Li went out and turned to the study in the front yard, but was blocked by 2 shadow guards at the door. Wang Fei, Prince said that he's not seeing anyone right now. Wang Fei, please stop. Yi Li glanced sideways at the 2 shadow guards who didn't dare to look at her, saying, What did you say? Prince said that he's not seeing anyone right now. Also, including Wang Fei. Yi Li indifferently took a step back, saying, I know you're following orders and I don't mean to make things difficult. But I want to go in now.